Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Was Son of Greek Gods and Became Hawaiian Demigod Part 2. Before we start, please go support Franklin Jr. LeBron for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Naruto is a male. Chapter 11. Annabeth, Naruto, who is your mother? The dark-haired man looked at the blonde with doubt. Well, I don't know if she has a name. I always call her Mom, that's all, he said, laughing nervously because in his billions of years, he had never asked his mother her name. But she's the Ook Akua Wahine Ihanao Jan no Na Mea Pa. Several people in the room were stunned by the boy's words. Does that mean what? Percy asked hesitantly, not understanding anything the Hawaiian said. It means the goddess born with the whole. My mother says it's because she was the first being to exist after what they call the Big Bang. Although she says that days or years later other beings appeared, though she doesn't talk much about them. Several demigods were shocked. That's technically impossible. The first to exist were the primordial children of chaos, like Uranus. And chaos was born before then. Naruto chaos? You mean that energy that existed before the explosion? Mom says that's just the energy that emerged before creation, calling it the fire of creation. The demigods were now left blank. First you tell us your mother was born at the beginning of everything, and then you say chaos is a mere flame? Naruto, not a simple flame, it's completely poisonous to anything that isn't a primordial. I only have the glacier sword under zero because Mom got it for me, he said, making the symbol on his shoulder light up, and in a golden glow, the ice butcher's sword he used against Kora appeared. My other weapons are far below this one, which is why it's my second favorite, he said, smiling, as he made the weapon disappear. Is that weapon made from the so-called flame of creation, which you call chaos? Lee Fletcher asked, and Naruto nodded. I'm trying to believe you, my friend, but I mean, Kora thought ice, and I doubt her simple flames are capable of that, right? Naruto met everyone's gaze, waiting for an answer. Do you want something certain or a guess? Because if it's the former, I have nothing, he said, smiling. Annabeth, just talk, she said with interest. Is that the only one who noticed Kora's eyes were white? She asked, and everyone shook their heads. Many noticed them, but yours were black, so they just thought it was something because of the speed at which they moved, she said, and Naruto nodded, until he looked at her confused. My eyes changed color? Fletcher, yeah. It felt like absolute darkness where the air didn't touch or vanished. Like an infinite void, it was frightening. I'm telling you this as a son of the god of the greatest source of light. Naruto was confused, but decided to leave it for later and ask his mother if something similar had ever happened to her before. It doesn't matter, I'm just saying that Kora isn't just descended from several gods. Her powers run even deeper, and the way she spoke to me proved it. Everyone nodded. Even this isn't reliable. I have many questions and more information. This is very incomplete, but we'll save it for later. Chiron will play the trumpet in a few seconds. Naruto nodded and Annabeth turned around to reflect. Everything about chaos and such was a little hard to believe since, although no story portrayed him as a thinking being, most still associated him as such because he had children. Although they forgot that the ways of being born in mythology were so rare and varied that it would not be strange if something without a body, mind, or even being alive could have children. But Annabeth had something else that interested her. She was Naruto's mother. He said she was the goddess born with everything, and that seemed familiar, but where would that be from? Many goddesses, like Izanami and Izanagi, have similar nicknames. Annabeth, her mother, is the leader of her pantheon, born millions of years ago and known for navigating with everything, that boils down to many deities. I whisper, annoyed because besides not knowing if she was a goddess or a primordial, many gods were born along with the universe such as Chaos, Shiva, Inazami, Inazagi, Are, Anubis, Thanatos, Uranus, and even the Nwaras. Annabeth, the language, he said, if only I could know what it is I could. The girl stopped when she remembered something. He said he was born and raised in Hawaii. That means his mother is the leading goddess there, who is also Dash. Annabeth was surprised to understand who Naruto's mother was. She was the goddess and leader of the entire Hawaiian pantheon. Cain. The goddess of birth, battles, existence, nature, wars, and much more. If he really is the son of the goddess Cain of the Hawaiian pantheon, that would justify his control over earth and fire, and even every element. Since she is depicted as a goddess several times, it is said that, as the goddess of birth, she could control everything that was born and that will be born. And apparently that went beyond just matter and elements. Annabeth, Naruto, if that's true, then we could do something with your abilities, she said, smiling and leaving Naruto confused for not even knowing what she meant. Even Kora's lineage would be overshadowed by that of the black-haired Hawaiian. She only had to take advantage of the boy's powers, and this and every time after that she could beat Azula's team. With that, Annabeth began to think about the entire plan to win. Naruto would be the center of this, and with some bait like Percy, the troublemakers would easily be out of the way. Katara, you'll go against Azula. You just have to hold out for a few minutes while Fletcher and his cabin help you. The girl nodded, ready to face her cousin. She was eager to defeat her by any means possible. Percy, you'll go to the left and wait there. A little nervous, the boy wearing a Spartan hat that looked more like a broom nodded. Naruto, you'll fight Kora directly, entertaining her, and if you can, create 2 copies of yourself to help us get past the defenses of the houses of Ares and Hephaestus. Naruto nodded attentively. Sure, he said, placing his hands on his forehead like a soldier ready for battle. Something that Annabeth put aside to continue thinking about the plan. She already got Azula out of the way with Katara. Clearly Clarice will go after Percy if he, accidentally, lets her know his location, and like Naruto she will stop Kora. That left the game practically won, given the fact that he had ground clones of the Hawaiian that would give him victory, unless the clones had an apparent weakness. Although some are still a danger, like Mai and Chaochu. Annabeth put that aside and continued with her thing. Everyone was ready, until the blast of the trumpet sounded by the Satyr Grover, starting the battle of both teams, led by Annabeth Chase, daughter of the goddess of strategic war and intelligence, and Azula Senso, daughter of the flames of war, violent war, and fire of battle. With the trumpet everyone started the battle. Annabeth made sure to send one of Apollo's sons to reveal Percy's position to Clarice while she and everyone else went ahead. Naruto created 2 Earth clones that followed the main team while he waited for everyone to leave. Leaving Katara, who knew where Azula was, he took the flag and headed toward the river that divides the 2 teams. Upon arriving, I look across at Kora, holding the flag in her hand in the same way. I thought the bossy one wouldn't let you go with a crazy plan where you were the center of it. Naruto smiled at that. No, although if I create a plan like that, I'll just have to keep you on the sidelines while she and the others do the rest, he said, pinning his flag to the tree. Doing the same, Kora raised an eyebrow in doubt. That would technically render our entry into the battle null and void, since you and I will be fighting, and they will be doing the same old thing. Naruto scratched his head because what he said was almost true, if it weren't for his ability to create clones. Actually, no, we have the advantage. While you can only support me, I can be in several places and help several people, he said, smiling, as he placed his hand on the wood, causing the earth to pull out the vines from these trees to stab Kora. She defended herself by using the water in the lake beside her to cut through the vines. Naruto, however, grasped her hand and froze the water, rendering her invulnerable to a root whip that sent her flying. Climbing down the tree, Naruto raised his hands, causing more stone-wrapped roots to sprout. In the distance, Kora approached as she moved her hands, and tornadoes began to cover the area. Naruto sensed this and braced himself as all the abyssal roots shot out at Kora's tornadoes. Which, as expected, all the roots were completely destroyed, leaving only rubble and the tornado standing, ready to attack Naruto directly. Without waiting long, she got ready, and as she raised her hand, Kora felt it. Several pillars of earth shot out at the user of various elements, who used the ability to redirect. He took the pillars to throw them again at Naruto, who moved away from the place, then dodged an earth spear directed towards him. But then he had to jump when another pillar popped out of position, and knocking it out of the air, Naruto frowned. She's better than me in every aspect of elemental control, It's best to fight in a different way than she's used to. With that in mind, Naruto used the same pillar that hit him as a support base to make a strong jump that took him away from the place, and in the air, he used his transformation ability again, turning into a squirrel. And using his elastic skin, he began to glide smoothly. Under Kora's attentive and confused gaze. A squirrel? I asked, rolling my eyes. Really? Didn't I have anything better like that eagle from last time? Leaving that aside, the brunette used the water from the lake and began sending water whips against Naruto, who had turned into a squirrel. And using her perfect, hard-to-catch form, the Hawaiian Demigod began to move from left to right, easily dodging all the whips. That was it? He asked with a smile and a squeakier voice, though the smile he barely noticed on Kora confused him. Until he was hit in the back by the same water whips, sending him crashing into a tree and destroying it, landing at his opponent's feet. With a victorious smile, she held him by his little nature rat back. I won, he said mockingly. I'm not giving up yet, he said, sticking his tongue out at the brunette. Then, enveloped in a golden smokescreen, his figure transformed into that of a cheetah, which sped off at top speed, disappearing from the sight of a stunned Kora. The black-haired girl was shocked to see that the four-legged creature that was now her friend had disappeared. I know I'm not a genius at this like Annabeth, but that's not the speed of a normal cheetah, she thought as she stood still. A surprise attack could come at any moment from the amazingly fast creature. Up! Kora was surprised to hear a husky voice speaking to her, when suddenly a blow from a black bear fell on her, leaving her astonished. Though she couldn't have been too surprised to find herself slammed into a crater that consumed the entire visible forest in a massive explosion. Naruto, who had returned to his normal form, looked at Kora, who, through sheer strength, still had her forearm wrapped in rock, and one of his feet braced against his knee, which he used to block Naruto's powerful blow as he transformed into a bear. Wow! You've gotten stronger than before? Naruto asked, smiling, because that blow was more than sure that it would have left her unconscious if he had used it in his other fight. Since his ability to transform was not to become a creature and that's it, but rather to transform and increase his physical attributes equivalent to the difference between the animal and a common human. An example would be an average human and an average bear. The difference between the two is vast and very noticeable. A normal bear is up to 30 times stronger than an average human. That same increase happened to him. His strength as a bear increased up to 30 times his original strength, but that same attribute applied to all physical attributes. A bear is typically up to 5 times less agile than a human but slightly faster, causing his agility to decline even as his speed increased a little more. That's why he was surprised by Kora's resilience, since although she held back a lot with that blow, it was still up to double the force he used to fight her in their previous fight. Naruto looked confused at the black-haired girl still on her knees. Was she losing control again like she had last time? If that was the case, he had to be careful to prevent the girl from doing anything dangerous, or so he thought. Bang! Naruto was surprised by the pillar of earth that hit him in the chin, sending him flying across the ground, and looking down, he saw Kora smiling as she stood up, while he did a flip and landed on his feet after the surprise blow. Kora, don't tell me you thought I was already down. We've barely started, so this time we're going all in, no holds barred. Since there's no one around to take our blows, how about that? Naruto smiled at that. He hadn't thought she'd held back that time, too. But it was clearly obvious, as they were both trying not to seriously hurt each other, much less anyone else. Naruto, okay, let's fight even more freely, he said when he started. Standing on both hands, Kora launched a parry at Naruto that caused a crescent of flames. Naruto was able to easily block it by redirecting the fire into the ground. And using this same fire, he propelled himself to the side, while a rain of fire came out in his direction from Kora, which he redirected again, although due to the large wall of flame he couldn't react to the air tornado that Kora threw at him from the air, which hit him head-on, causing the flames he used to move to fall. But reacting, he began to move a ground pole to knock the girl out of the air. She placed her hands in an X to cushion the blow, but was still sent flying. In the air, he noticed a pigeon approaching his position. And transforming again, Naruto appeared on her back, to try to hit that Kora managed to block. And starting a strong hand-to-hand fight, Naruto made several rocks float and kicked towards Kora, who used the leg to block. But quickly both fell. And barely touching the ground, they shot forward at high speed, colliding knees and forearms. But Naruto, being faster, grabbed Kora's hands and threw her, sending walls of rocks hurtling towards her. He moved his hands and like a spear a powerful flame came out, piercing the stone walls cleanly. Leaving them both standing, they smiled at each other. "You're still holding back, aren't you? How about we put this warm-up aside and go all out from now on?" Naruto said as his eyes, unknowingly, became darker and darker again, while the same thing happened to Kora, who unknowingly had her eyes shining with a bright light. And both of them got ready to fight. Naruto made a sword come out in a golden glow, ready to use it in combat. And as he was about to launch himself, the trumpet of the end of the battle sounded. Chapter 12. Naruto looked up in confusion when he saw his team with the red flag representing the opposing team. Something that also surprised Kora was that neither of them sensed anyone else approaching. Although it could easily be due to their great ignorance when fighting, since they got so carried away that the forest had been almost completely demolished, leaving a large crater that could have been a kilometer around. This angered the surrounding nymphs. Annabeth, carrying the crimson flag, approached Naruto and smiled. "Well done, Naruto. Thanks to you, we were able to win. And Kora, it was very foolish of you to take your flag and run away with it," she said, while Kora frowned next to Naruto. "Hey, you broke your promise. You said we'd both fight so we could each get the flag, not that someone would come and take it from behind." Naruto turned to look at Kora, his face blank. "I'm more lost than you, believe me. I'm pretty sure I didn't feel anyone while we were fighting," he said, then smiled. "And I would never break a promise. I just didn't know anyone was crazy enough to join our battle. Besides, if that were the case, I wouldn't bring my flag like I said," he said, while Annabeth frowned at his side. "Naruto, you did what?" Hearing the tone, a bead of sweat fell down Naruto's face, realizing he'd given away his deal. "Well, I made a deal with Kora before the battles. We would both bring our flags and fight, and the winner gets to keep the other's flag." Annabeth sighed, annoyed by the risky plan, even though it helped them capture the hip early. It also annoyed her because her entire plan could have been ruined if the other team randomly found the opposing flag like them. "Aid!" Naruto's ear twitched, and he raised an eyebrow as he heard a familiar voice shout. "Hey Annabeth, what happened with Percy?" I asked, noticing that the demigod wasn't around. And with so many presences around, I couldn't exactly say which one was the son of the god of the oceans. The blonde looked at her companion and shrugged. "Clarice must have already broken one or both of his legs, but I really don't know anything about him," she said, very unconcerned about the matter. The boy took Ares's most stubborn daughter from her. The rest was no longer relevant. Sweating profusely, Naruto looked into the distance where Percy must have been. But before he could leap in that direction, he saw a figure falling at high speed toward them. "Attention, a possible attack," Kora said, looking towards the same place as the Hawaiian demigod in the sky. Naruto stood in the place where he thought the figure would fall, and in a firm way he caught in his arms what was a figure with a large armor that did not let know what or who it was. But the others recognized him easily. Kora approached, took the girl from Naruto's hands and removed her helmet, revealing the face of the unconscious Clarice. "Hey Fletcher, we need you to heal her." The blonde son of Apollo approached, placing his hands on top of the armor. A translucent green aura covered the demigod's hands, surprising Naruto with the healing ability. Taking his hands off, the blonde man stepped back a little, his face worried. "He has no external injuries since he didn't fall to the ground, but some of his ribs are badly damaged and others are out of place, threatening organs, and he's unconscious from a hard blow from before he fell." He sighed because this wasn't something he could easily cure, and with the ribs out of place, it could cause them to pierce through the organs in an attempt to put them back together. Everyone was worried about the situation. If not the best healer in the camp could, it means that more than a few demigods are needed. Until the blonde daughter of Athena thought of a possibility, a very low one, but at least she had the chances that Clarice would survive. Hey Naruto! She called to the dark-haired man, who looked at her doubtfully. Do you have anything to cure her? I asked with a glimmer of hope, which vanished when I saw the boy's denial. I never needed to heal. My body does it automatically, he said, crossing his arms, earning the girl's hopeless nod. They returned to the same spot, or so he thought, since the Hawaiian decided to speak. Naruto, but I can try. I mean, I'm an easy learner when it comes to learning on the fly. He shrugged. It was never difficult for him to learn anything on the fly. The only thing he didn't learn was fire control, and that was because the volcano only talked about theories and never about practice. Fletcher, well, on your mother's side, you should be able to, so let's try, he said, approaching Clarice again next to Naruto to place his hands on the dented armor on his chest. Do the same as me, okay? Naruto nodded and stepped closer to place his hands next to the Fletcher's. Good. Try using your divine energy in the palms of your hand, he said, his hands becoming enveloped in a golden aura similar to the glow of the sun, but clearly less intense. And doing the same, Naruto's hands were wrapped in a translucent energy without any characteristic color, which was strange since a color was the normal thing to represent the demigods. But leaving that behind, Lee Fletcher began to focus on his divine powers and sighed. The next step was the simplest, yet most sensible. Now use the sensation you feel when healing from a wound. Transform your magic into the white blood cells that heal you, so you can pass it through your aura. Naruto nodded, concentrating on the explanation. He waited a bit, then began to feel the sensation he could identify as his healing factor. Using that same sensation, he opened one eye to see the glowing green aura in his hand. Bringing his hand closer to the unconscious girl who, through magic, slowly the scratches and bruises disappeared, and using his own healing magic, Fletcher noticed that the internal wounds were healing, along with her ribs being organized in the correct way. She's stable now, but how did she end up like this? Fletcher asked, seeing that the fall of the daughter of Ares had even surpassed a mountain of 700 to 1,000 meters. If she was sent that far, it must have been a brutal blow. Naruto, I think I know that, Percy screamed a few seconds ago, and they were together. Kora's eyes widened at that. Does that mean Percy's with whatever hit her so hard? She asked, surprised and worried for the camper. If so, we should go help him. He could die. Naruto nodded. Anastasia, Kora and I will go with Fletcher here. The others go and spread the word about it, she said as she ran out with the others. My name is Annabeth, the girl whispered as she went with the rest of her team to notify the camp, or that was the plan, since without saying anything Katara followed Naruto and company. With Naruto, the trio could be seen running in the direction where the demigod was, as Naruto could sense the demigod to some extent. But as he noticed, he was outside the barrier, which made what he could sense considerably late. Naruto, this way, he said as he jumped and ended up in a tree towards a clearing where the demigod's last registered signature was, which was exactly where the barrier surrounding the camp ended. Looks like this is where Clarice was hit, Kora said in surprise. They were more than 5 kilometers away from where the girl fell, so the blows she received must have been very powerful. Percy isn't here, possibly dead, the boy said, but a scream drew the trio's attention to a distant location. He's outside the barrier and alive. I'm surprised, Kora said, dropping down from the tree. Naruto copied her action and looked to where he heard the scream. Shall we go there? It's outside the barrier, and normally these days, outside the barrier is where there are the most monsters. Naruto smiled at that. If that's true, then we should be prepared, he said, as amidst the golden dust, a dull metal spear appeared. The spear's blade was double, which was also strange, like 2 blades like a seer's, but shorter and ending in a mini point at the back of the spear, with a rune on the top of the weapon's handle. Fletcher, I'd like to help, but really, I didn't bring my bow and I don't have any arrows, so I won't be much use, he said, embarrassed. But a bow fell into his hands, and looking at it, he noticed it was the same Hawaiian one he used before in his different battles. Do not break it, it is a gift from the god Ku, he said as he jumped out of the tree, and Kora looked at her friend, son of Apollo, confused. Who is that god? She asked, knowing better than anyone that there wasn't a god with that name on Olympus. Even without being the daughter of Athena, she knew that. And although equally confused by not knowing the god in question, Fletcher smiled calmly as he spoke. There's no time, but briefly, Naruto could be your great-grandfather on your father's side, he said as he jumped up and followed the Hawaiian to see the place and analyze it. And leaving Kora, her great-grandfather, even more confused? But to do that, he'd have to be at least older than Cronus, the personification of time in the mortal world. I'd better ask him later, she whispered, following the duo of demigods who left her a little behind. Okay, stay back and watch our backs. Kora and I will go head on with whatever the monster is that's trying to eat that boy, he explained as he swiped his hand through the barrier, and with a bit of unnecessary force, he managed to break free. Copying his actions, Kora followed suit, followed by Fletcher. Fine, but where are the arrows? I asked, now that I had no ammunition at all. The bow is made to channel your battle spirit into the weapon. I don't know what that means, but thanks to that, I can transfer the power of one of my two elements and create arrows. If you want, try that, he said, holding his spear as he calmly explained. He stopped when his eyes caught sight of what were claws even larger than those on the battlefield before. Naruto, hey Kora, is there any animal big enough to rip 5 meters apart like it's nothing? I ask, and the brunette looks at him in confusion, until she notices the slash that the boy was looking at, which could be twice or more the same Hawaiian. Something like that could only be done by a hellhound. But that size is too abnormal. The best thing is to find Percy, she said, now more serious, apparently. Something of that size promised too much destruction for the camp and deaths for the campers, especially if that's what her mind was suggesting. Help. Here, Naruto shouted, not waiting any longer to notice the boy's presence along with the scream he let out, although something that confused him was the presences around him. Although they were all the same, there were too many of them and the size of the presence was abnormal. Naruto, Fletcher, I'm entrusting my back to you, said Naruto as he transformed into a cheetah, and at breakneck speeds, the divine animal shot out at top speed towards the place, moving away from the campers in a fraction of a thousandth of a second, leaving Kora and Fletcher alone, a bead of sweat on his head. That back is farther away than Europe itself, he whispered mockingly as he unleashed his divine aura and, in an arrow made of light, prepared to fire. Fletcher, ladies first, he spoke with a smile as Kora ran ahead, while he followed behind, alert for any surprise attacks or ambushes. Monsters tended to be smart when it suited them. With Naruto, the cheetah could be seen running at full speed, then began to slow down until it stopped and revealed itself to the puma, which transformed back into the Hawaiian in a golden glow. More marks, but they're smaller now, he thought, looking at the marks, though something he didn't like was seeing 2 more different types of footprints. One was easily recognizable, like the feet of a minotaur, but the others confused him a bit, since they were both. Naruto, well, humans, what's a footprint like that doing around here? No one should be hanging around these parts, he thought, noticing the size of the foot. Normally I would have thought of Percy, but noticing the build and proportion of the foot, it was easy to say it was someone older, someone with bigger feet but stronger due to the depth, taller and faster, and above all someone capable of cutting down half a forest in one fell swoop. Whoever attacked the Minotaur was recently here while we were playing the game of Capture the Flag, he thought as he looked at everything peacefully, even the corpse of a Minotaur that was easily slashed in half, along with the entire visible forest. If asked for an estimate, he might say it was 11 square kilometers or even more, which is both surprising and dangerous. Using so much force and destruction to kill a Minotaur of that size shouldn't be done, as it could accidentally harm anyone around it. Aid. Naruto listened to the boy again and looked into the distance, where a large creature was. From its fiery puppy-like shape, he could tell it was a hellhound. But if its 5 meters size told him that thing wasn't just a puppy, it was a full-fledged adult. Hey Kora, this isn't a puppy, right? He asked the day that had just entered the meadow where he was hiding, as they looked at the destroyed area. Seeing the creature like Naruto, they hid so as not to be seen. What the hell? Suddenly, The large creature began to look around furiously. While looking at the clearing behind him, it looked just as basic as the entire forest. So it went back to its old tricks, trying to bite a Percy Jackson who was inside a cave that for now could be mistaken for the creature from hell. Meanwhile, Naruto and Kora were grabbing Fletcher, who had been the one responsible for casting the curse that had nearly caught the hound's attention. Are you crazy? If they find out, they'll eat us. Have you never heard of this adult stuff or something? Kora asked angrily, while Fletcher nodded, a little embarrassed. I'm sorry, Kora. It's just that I found it surprising to be able to see something so big. He apologized as he gave a small bow. Hey Kora, what's so scary about that thing? Is it really dangerous? The boy's question made Kora remember that she had only been at the camp for 2 days and had lived as a demigod, so her confusion about the creature's presence and power was clearly justified. The Hellhounds are the children of Cerberus, the guardian of Hades, the realm where the dead go and where the god of the same place, named Hades, reigns. Naruto, a god named Hades rules a realm called Hades? Should I assume this realm was named after the god, or that the god was named after the realm? I asked, but Kora shrugged. I don't remember exactly, but I know that Hades was called that before the god Hades was born. So you can guess the latter. Say no or don't worry. Naruto nodded, listening. And returning to the topic, these hellhounds are among the most powerful creatures in the Greek pantheon, as they are the offspring of Cerberus. But the most dangerous are the adults, as their great power allows them to open space-time itself, being the only creature born in the underworld capable of leaving without Cerberus's permission. Naruto nodded as he listened to everything that was said. So, in short, that thing damages or opens space-time, the very structure of the universe, to escape from the underworld, a different space-time. I write calmly, while Kora nods because it was the best summary. If that's true, how do you deal with it? I asked, looking at both veteran campers, who blushed. Adult children of Cerberus don't usually go out, and when they do, they're usually commanded by Lord Apollo or Lady Artemis. We've never faced one, Kora admitted, embarrassed. Naruto, and why don't you call those two? Fletcher, those two have things to do, too, and Artemis would never marry anything near camp. So I'd rather have him go away and then marry him in peace, which we can't let happen, because Percy's going to get eaten up if we leave him any longer. Kora spoke up to reinforce her companion's statement. So it's our duty to stop or at least keep that thing away from the camp so it doesn't damage the barrier or break in with its power. Naruto, if what you say is true, our attacks will have no effect. Why is that? I mean, we know our power gap is huge. But isn't that overstating it to say it won't have any effect? Kora said, feeling a little underestimated. He knew he wasn't up to the task, as Heracles had barely been able to defeat one and had to ascend to win. But to say it couldn't even touch him was a clear underestimation of his abilities. Naruto, I don't want you to take me the wrong way, but if we're talking about the ethical side of power levels, a being capable of interacting with reality as a physical entity quickly places a dimensional axis above our own three-dimensional proportion. So, objectively, that thing is completely invulnerable to anything three-dimensional like us. He explained calmly, remembering that about his mother, someone who damages a dimensional structure as if it were something physical is automatically superior to it, and if those hellhounds could do that, then they must be at a fourth-dimensional axis standard, something superior to his third-dimensional axis. Kora. So what can we do? She asked, annoyed because if that were true, the Bloodhound was invulnerable to everything the campers had. So no one should be able to beat him inside the camp. Naruto. Normally I'd say run, but we need to save Percy, so we'll do what I say, okay? He asked, earning nods from the other two campers. Okay, here's the plan. Chapter 13. Okay, here's the plan, Naruto said, looking into the distance as the Hellhound continued to play with Percy's fears. The boy would definitely change after that. Kora and I will have as much time as possible and move them a few meters away. After that, Fletcher will take Percy, and if we're still alive, he'll come back and help us escape more easily. Fletcher, that sounds good and simple, but are you sure you can hold out long enough to move those things at least 1 kilometer from that position? I asked, looking at the large hellhound, about 5 or 6 meters tall and a hellish crimson color. What Fletcher says is true. Can we hold out long enough? Naruto shrugged. It'll be difficult, but we can hold out for a long time. But we need to find some weakness. That thing probably has one. Maybe that'll give us a better chance. Kora, well, there's no information. But it's known that they're not the fastest in the underworld. They also don't have good eyesight in the human world, and they tend to be overconfident. The girl explained, summoning fire tornadoes around her, created by the friction created by the wind's speed. That'll do the trick, she said, smiling as her body was covered in a golden color, and she quickly turned into a cheetah. Although that caused Kora to turn to look at him, very confused. A cheetah? I mean, you'll be faster, but much weaker. Are you sure you can do something? I asked, but the cheetah, without much interest, only caused a feline growl that left Kora confused. Okay, she answered, very confused. Good, Fletcher, wait for the perfect moment and don't rush it. He said, looking at the son of Apollo, who nodded, while loading an arrow in case it was necessary. With that, the cheetah and Kora left the forest. Leaping from the tree, they began to slowly fall in an unearthly manner. Naruto, transformed into a cheetah, sensing danger, curled his tail, causing spikes of earth to shoot out, though not in his direction. And at the same time, Kora used the wind around her to propel herself to one place. When suddenly and without anyone noticing, a great scream of pure force came from the gigantic hellhound in their direction. And they could barely use their elemental controls to move. Naruto had to be pushed by Kora with her wind to leave the impact area. As if it were a fan moving paper, all the trees and other places were raised as if nothing had happened, and even the mountain that divided the view of the camp simply disappeared along with the more than 39,000 square kilometers that surrounded them. Once outside, Kora began to stand, surprised by the attack's magnitude. She'd only seen attacks like this from superpowered chimeras or high-ranking mythological beasts, but even with restraint, the hellhound was able to do that. Naruto! The girl, noticing the absence of the dark-haired boy, became visibly worried. Don't worry, I'm here, said a voice, approaching slowly through the smoke that covered the place. And as he became more visible, Kora became frightened by the boy's condition. Oh my God, are you? Naruto smiled as his entire left side was shredded, his skin gone, and all his muscles exposed, while his arm, or what was left of it, was a perfectly severed stump. How did this happen to you? Oh my God, we must find a way to heal you, she said, worried for the boy who shook his head, while her healing seemed to continue taking effect, healing the damage to his body. Give me a few seconds and I'll get back to combat. The unconfident girl stayed beside the healing boy. Let me help you, he said, causing the water to move in the direction of nearby plants and trees. It glowed more green than blue and trained on the boy's wounds. He raised an eyebrow at the effect, realizing it was helping his healing. Thank you so much, Kora, she said, smiling. Though he then stood up, now healed from the attack, he activated his regeneration and began healing his arm in a few moments. Normally, all wounds would disappear in seconds, if not thousandths of a second, but he was wasting too much of the little divine energy he collected. So using them correctly was their best card. Okay, I'm ready. Now let's go for it, he said, but was stopped by the girl. No, you could have died, and you want to rush into battle like this? We'll take it slow and steady. This isn't a simple battle. We need a more precise plan. Naruto was embarrassed and nodded. I'm only hurt by the space distortion caused by the attack, not the destruction of it, he thought, remembering how, in his cheetah form, he could see the space-time distortion that covered him and reached his left side. He barely lost his arm, as the same distortion in space-time opened up, and by opening up right between his arm and shoulders, it severed them as a countermeasure. Because if space is opened, whatever is inside, whether inferior or attached to it, will be severed at the same time. Like his arm. Kora, okay, the plan is to surround him, look for blind spots, and attack to distract him as much as possible. I'm warning you, never attack head-on if he's paying attention to you, she said seriously, and the boy nodded because it was good advice. He had never faced these types of enemies, and almost none of his few adversaries were his equal, or it was just training, so he lacked a bit of experience in using his head in battles more than his strength. Naruto, fine, then I'll go with something more useful, he whispered as he began to move his hands, causing a noticeable cold to enter the environment. Naruto's hands were covered by a slight crimson glow that at the same time made some powerful flames emerge. Kora, don't you just control the heat? She asked, confused with her hand on her hip. Naruto, yes, although I can make a flame emerge from a high concentration of heat and oxygen. I cannot control the flames at will in a moldable way, and it takes a long time and I lose concentration in battle. That's a problem. Naruto, don't worry, it's something very big, so I won't lose sight of it so easily, he said while charging the fire, and using a bit of the divine summoning energy, the powerful flames noticeably. Kora saw this and activated 2 powerful air tornadoes that quickly turned into fire in her hands. Let's go again, like you said, without attacking forward. He spoke as his body, covered by a golden glow, transformed into a cheetah again and sped off, surrounding the hellhound, who, as if nothing had happened, stomped hard, unbalancing the divine cheetah's gait, and, above all, a strong earthquake shook the nearby areas. Kora, who was hovering with a sphere of air at her feet, looked at this with a frown. At this rate, even Washington will be damaged if they keep launching attacks of that magnitude, she thought worriedly. The earthquake it caused had a minimum magnitude of around 8, or even a theoretical 10, and reached the nearest city, Washington. But seeing as that only destabilized the Happy Panther, it's likely to make another attack even more powerful than that. And that will do terrible damage not just to the surrounding areas, but to the city itself, and if they anger him enough, to the entire continent. Kora, I have to find a way to keep it from doing so much damage, but at the same time keep it moving farther away. Leaving her thoughts behind, the girl decided to help the Hawaiian demigod who was in trouble. Having to move around the creature, and due to its speed, the creature attacked without any room for error. This resulted in possible attacks where Percy was hiding and where Fletcher was waiting, which the boy had to try to block or even receive. And that always ended with him losing a limb and healing quickly. But she herself knew that this couldn't continue forever, both because of the strain it put on the boy and because the infernal creature's patience wasn't infinite. Imprison! With that still in the air sphere, he caused several abnormally large rock pillars to cover the hellhound in a circular prison that ended in a point like a triangle. Naruto, seeing that, moved behind the dog and left his animal form and prepared his hands in flaming coils. And with a brilliance like the sun, the powerful flames that were twice the size of the dog were directed like a friend laser ready to consume the form of the hellish puppy. He barely saw that and didn't even flinch. When his canine teeth showed, a wild grin was barely noticed by Naruto, who opened his eyes in surprise. When, quickly, the dog opened his mouth once more and everything happened. With a great scream, but this time to the ground. The great scream rocked the entire area, and Naruto and Kora, looking at each other before everything happened, nodded, knowing what they should do. At that moment, the power of the scream hit everything in a great explosion, being up to 5 times bigger and more powerful than that of a hydrogen bomb. It covered the entire camp, the entire forest, and even the entire forest. If humans could see mythology, they would notice the massive explosion that caused a mushroom cloud more than 8 kilometers high and covered a grand total of 75,000 square kilometers. The equivalent of 5 cities like Tokyo. As the explosion subsided, the entire field became visible, devoid of vegetation. It was merely miles and miles of rock and destruction, with only a few remaining plant life within the camp's barrier, along with the demigods themselves and the few nature spirits who had managed to reach the site before the attack. Meanwhile, Naruto could be seen elsewhere. He was barely recognizable because of his completely burned skin, making him a barely known figure, and was slowly healing. As his flesh, muscles, veins, skin, and hair returned, along with his tattoos and Hawaiian runes. "Wow, that was amazing," he said, at a loss for words. As he received such a tremendous attack, the destruction wasn't the danger. Rather, the attack power of the caster was so superior to his own that he simply couldn't withstand it even if the destruction was less. The only reason she survived was that she was able to activate her regeneration and perform a burn and heal before dying. I just hope Kora made it there. What do you think? He asked a question to a rock he had protected with his body. This rock was the place where he kept the son of the ocean, who was only alive because he reinforced the rock with his divine summoning energy and insulated the heat with his domain so that it wouldn't be fried inside. Naruto, that's getting too dangerous. The best thing to do now is to get Percy inside with the others. And then get that thing as far away as possible. He thought to himself. Looking around the area, he sighed because he knew what had happened. All the lives, both mortal and immortal, animal, human, and spirit. They all died in the area of the attack, and that would be a huge bummer, in short. Naruto, I can't take it anymore, my divine energy is at its limit. I'm sure I won't be able to summon things for a while, and even if I regenerate my divine energy, I might be lost for a while. Leaving his worries behind until after the bigger issue was resolved, the boy smiled, but clearly fearful of what could be his death. I have a lot of training to do after this. Maybe activating the Genesis renaming would be a good idea. She thought as she focused her gaze on a spot, seemingly only meters away from her location. She noticed how, indeed, Fletcher and Kora were within the barrier at its edge, and they were able to arrive in time thanks to the camp leader's incredible speed. Although the Fletcher boy seemed to have some permanent damage, such as burns on his feet due to the speed at which he moved, at least he was well enough to say that he will live a few more days. Seeing that he could be calmer now, he took the large rock that was holding Percy inside and, hoping to have good enough aim, threw it at Kora, resulting in a crash of thunder hitting her eardrums. Well, let's fight, he said, bumping his fist into his palm. He could sniff, that much was clear. But at least he'd get his eyes off the creature from the camp as much as possible, perhaps even taking it somewhere else with him if he played his cards right. It's also a struggle, and he loved struggles even when he was afraid of dying in them. Moving his hands calmly, he decided to make the covers shine golden, boosting their strength as much as possible, even though that would cost a bit later. Having stopped thinking so much, he decided to finally take action. And that's what he did when he lunged at the hellhound, who, as if nothing had happened, swatted him away with his abnormally long tail, sending him skidding across the ground. But, recovering his posture, he continued his attack. This time, running straight ahead, he braced himself for the creature's mighty scream. But instead of meeting or stopping it, he caused a rock pillar to close the creature's mouth as it slid past. While standing under the dog, he summoned a pillar with a sharp point, an attempt that quickly proved futile. The rock's point barely broke upon contact. Dimensional logic: no conventional ability will harm a higher dimensional being. At that moment, he remembered his mother's teaching, which made him grit his teeth because he'd forgotten the most basic things. But without losing hope, it's as simple as it sounds when another pillar emerges from one of the hound's feet. Losing his balance, he quickly tried to regain his footing by moving to the right. But not letting that happen, Naruto appeared above the dog and used his ground control to destabilize the other 3 legs. When it fell on its side with a loud sound, Naruto used every second of it to speed toward the creature, shifting into his cheetah form to take advantage of the 1000th possible opportunity. He ended up de-transforming in front of him, but ready to hit him with one of his enhanced arms. Or so the plan was, since with just a breath, Naruto noticed something, and it was that space-time opened up like a sheet being pierced by a gunshot. And from that adventure, in slow motion, Naruto noticed his arm being consumed, and without knowing what would happen, he felt the greatest pain he thought he would ever feel, and it was in his stomach. Falling to the ground as if he were nothing, the boy spat out blood as he noticed his fist was filled with blood and his stomach had a hole in its abdomen. Although it began to heal, it might take a few seconds longer than normal. What the hell? My attack just hit me, just like that. He wondered as he felt an incredible pain in his stomach. Normally he could withstand his own blows since he had the peculiarity of being up to 3 times more resistant than powerful. But that blow was influenced by a power that was not his. Naruto, and tell me why you did that. My attack couldn't hurt you even if it hit you 100 times at once. So I wasn't doing any harm, he said, looking at the hound, who stood up, but instead of doing anything, lay down like a puppy and seemed to be ready to sleep if the closing of his eyes meant anything. "Hey, don't ignore me. If I'm going to die, at least I have to know that, right?" he asked, but the dog opened one eye and with a sigh, space-time opened up again. That made Naruto's sweat drop. Something so strong that it could damage the three-dimensional structure of the world with a breath was something only expected of the gods. Nami can do this identically as he can in his true form, but could I? He thought, still lying on the ground. He knew that as soon as the dog got up, it would die, and any normal person would run. But that would only make the target wherever it was, which if it was the camp, would bring losses, and if it was their island, it would bring war. "Get up now, lazybones," he said, putting his whole hand into the bloodhound's nose, who suddenly stood up and sighed angrily, his arm disappearing in response to the simple sigh. "Every time you do this you tell me I'm just a game in front of high echelons, you know? But in 2 more 30 seconds if I don't fight I'll get the Genesis renaming activated. That would be useless besides being painful, since the difference in power was so great that becoming about 3 times stronger would be useless because it would never reach the level of defeating or scratching that thing." Renaming Genesis, the ability given to him as a blessing of his birth by the Hawaiian nature goddess, where the ability gave him 3 chances after a fight. The first and most common option was to become twice as strong if he managed to escape a fight before losing it. It was humiliating, but a good alternative. Although the ability only worked if he was out of the fight for more than 10 minutes, his escape would be considered a success. The second was the middle ground of the 3 options, meaning he managed to survive a battle even if he lost, but he did stay until the end. His power would increase 3-fold, and since that was his condition, that would happen to him. However, he would have to stay out of the fight, not escaping for more than a minute. But in a battle where he wins, depending on the difference in victory, his power would increase. If the difference in victory is significant, it will only be 4 times. Being a mid-range fighter, it could vary from a few to hundreds, all depending on the battle. And with great difficulty, it never happened to him, so he didn't know. But he must have been very tall. The dog grinned savagely, as Naruto stood up, ready to continue fighting. The ability would wear off though, and he would have to last another minute without fighting but without escaping for his survival without escaping a fight to be considered a success. "Let's just keep going, shall we?" she said, noticing the hellhound's grin, which made it clear what was coming next. He was having fun with her fear, with the fight, or simply with her humiliation as she tried to beat him, which was impossible. The boy didn't know that, but that didn't matter to him either. After all, it wouldn't help him win regardless. "Well, let's get to it." Activating his rune, the golden dust covered one of his arms. He then revealed golden gloves covered in black designs. These gloves were a gift given by the goddess of fire who was also his volcano friend, this being the most aggressive goddess of the entire pantheon and who was his friend, only because limiting herself to hating him for being the first demigod of her patron was, in her words, something immature. The gloves, nicknamed the Determined Win, or gave him a probability of winning a fight increased by 10% added to the already previous possibilities due to his determination was enough to continue a fight, and although this did not change the little possibility he had. The ability to resist would be useful, and the other ability called the Fall is not defeat would also give him incredible durability, as long as he still has the power to fight regardless of the amount. He would fight as if he were at 100%, giving so that even though he only has 2% of his energy, he would continue as if he were at his maximum. Making it seem like the wounds, blows, and fatigue didn't affect him at all for a brief moment. Until he fell, of course, since after falling, his durability would return to its original level, depending on his current state. Naruto. Until the last fall with honor. With this, the flames grew stronger and the boy's previously honey-colored eyes turned a strong gold, while determination and resolve were forged in his heart, showing the honor he had. Since the aforementioned, until the final fall, was a state where his determination was affected by his honor status and the amount of determination he had, ensuring that his honor never diminished, and therefore, he remained as determined as he was from the beginning of the skill. Chapter 14. Kora could be seen being treated alongside Fletcher, as she was hit, or at least her right foot, by the creature's attack. She could barely move her leg, which, although fine, was badly damaged and would require a few hours underwater. Kora, what happened there? The mountain and the kilometer are gone, thousands of nature spirits and campers are injured or... The camp leader lowered her head, knowing what he meant. An apparently adult hellhound is out there. He's been causing all this destruction, she said, standing up. But as she stood on her injured foot, she stumbled and fell sideways. Annabeth held her up to help her sit back down. If that's true, that means Percy and Naruto. Katara looked at this worriedly. Meanwhile, Moana looked at Nani, worried. But a denial from the water spirit/goddess calmed her. No, they're not dead, she said, settling down on the ground to call for some water and begin to heal her wound as much as possible. The plan was for me to bring Lee Fletcher and for you to stay and protect Percy. Annabeth, and did you see if he succeeded? I asked seriously. And Kora, without having an answer, shook her head. But I trust he did it, she said determinedly. If she could get here and cover all those kilometers in seconds, the Uzumaki should have reached Percy and covered him in time. The problem was whether the defense she used could protect them both, or if the Hawaiian even took protection of his own. Nani, I assure you that young Naruto is alive, he said suddenly, drawing the camper's attention. Why do you think that? Grover asked. His doubt turned to embarrassment when everyone looked at him. Nani, I can feel his essence very clearly from here, and he's more alive than ever, she said, smiling as reassuringly as possible. And although several were suspicious, others believed his words, as they did with Kora. That still doesn't mean this fighter isn't a bloodhound, and if he's an adult, it's worse, the blonde, scarred son of Hermes reminded everyone. Though she quickly earned an angry glare from Kora, causing her to silently apologize for disturbing the little peace the water spirit's words brought. What should we do, Kora? Annabeth asked, being the calmest person in the situation. It's simple, nothing, she said, sitting down while staring at her wound. And as expected, her words caused a stir. We must do something. Even if the boy survived, he couldn't beat that thing, Clarice said, her armor gone. They removed it so she could rest more comfortably. Kora, what do you want us to do? That thing erased everything with a scream. Naruto says no ability can damage it because of resignations or something, and I really can't damage it with anything. I can't do anything. If you go, you'll die at the first scream or a simple sigh, he said seriously. Annabeth, this time I agree with Clarice, I said, surprising everyone. Even if what you're saying is true, we can't let that thing finish Naruto off. Because then, what would it target? Exactly the camp. Everyone nodded because that was as obvious as it got. If that's true, it's best to get him away from here. There are too many young people here to wait for him to just leave, Fletcher said, standing up. While Kora worried, she approached the boy who was previously unconscious. Fletcher, are you okay? She asked worriedly. While the boy dismissed her concern and stood up, better than Kora could. Besides his slightly burned foot, he didn't have anything serious. Fletcher, we veterans must protect others when Mr. D isn't around. It's our duty to protect the younger ones, so we shouldn't even hesitate. We'll go out there and give our lives if necessary. Annabeth, then it's settled. But we still have to act intelligently, while we buy ourselves time. Someone has to warn some god about this, she said, and everyone looked at Kora. You're the fastest. Only you could get back and forth from New York in seconds. Katara spoke, looking at her familiar. My foot is too damaged. Sooner or later, I'll lose mobility, and that would be even worse, she said, trying to heal herself. Her foot was too damaged, and the Hellhound's attack wasn't helping. Then Luke must be going. He's the second fastest, Clarice said, looking at the blonde with the scar on his cheek. That will take me 10 minutes, could you hold on that long? Kora frowned, narrowing her eyes in anger and suspicion. New York is only 360 kilometers further than Washington, which is 40. That's only 400 kilometers. Don't buck with me about how long it'll take. She spoke angrily, forcibly standing up. But she was quickly stopped by Annabeth. You have to understand that not all of us have your abilities. If Luke estimates that number, it's because that's what it should be. I'm speaking seriously, meaning then I'll look at my friend. Better go from now on, time is the most valuable thing we have. The blond boy nodded as he disappeared in a blur of speed. That jerk, he ran that same distance in 3 minutes. But now he comes out with that 10-minute bullshit. The camp leader clenched her fists, because all the shit was going on today. The gods were too busy with the potential battle between Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus for even Dionysus to be with them. And now it'll take Luke 10 minutes to go and ask the gods for help. How could they last 10 minutes with that thing? She and Naruto barely lasted 5 and only survived because he played with them. Katara, Kora, stop hurting yourself. It's the last thing we need right now. I speak, bringing the girl out of her reverie, and looking at her hands, I notice her nails digging into her palms. But ruling out something so minor, she decided to take the first step forward. Okay, let's go, she said as she took a step out of the barrier that gave them minimal protection from the creature's attack. But in that instant, as she crossed the portal, Kora had to jump back as a piece of rock crashed down where she had been perched. Having landed badly, Kora held her foot, which was more injured than before. What's that? Luke asked, Clarice striking the rock with her spear, which magically crumbled into tiny particles of earth, revealing a red-hot but well-groomed Percy. Percy! Everyone stared at the unconscious boy, who seemed to be constantly short of breath. He must have been without air for quite some time. Perhaps the rock didn't filter the air at all, Annabeth said, as some campers at her side took the body of the son of Poseidon. Take him to rest. He sorted through the available items while paying attention to them, confused by the lack of some. Where are Mai Azula and Ty Lee? His words made everyone look at each other in confusion. The daughters of Ares, Hephaestus and Hermes should have been here a long time ago. It is impossible that no one has noticed the explosion in the camp. Kora. That doesn't matter, she said, standing up. I have to finish getting ready. I'll be back in a second, he said, leaving the group for a few seconds as fast as he could manage in his condition. They looked at each other. Can we really do something meaningful? Clarice suddenly asked, drawing Annabeth's gaze to her. Sighing, the daughter of the goddess of wisdom shook her head. We'll probably fall from the first blow or from some shockwave as we leave this barrier. But Kora is too discouraged to fight like this. Fletcher, this is bullshit. It's barely been a minute since Luke left, and I can already say I'm dead. The camper sighed resignedly. Clarice, it's best to put all this behind us. If we continue like this, we'll only fall faster. The first thing on the battlefield is self-confidence. Without it, you're simply useless. Thank you, the son of Apollo said sarcastically, his confidence barely changing. At least I can say this bow will help me survive for a few seconds. He thought to himself, resigned to dying. He didn't have many options other than running away. That would only make him hated by everyone, including himself, for such cowardice. What would you do in this position, Dad? The boy wondered, looking at the sky, or rather, the sun. The sun didn't even seem to pay attention to them. Apollo wasn't one to look at others while moving his car through South America anyway. Just don't die, Naruto, I whisper as I watch a fiery explosion erupt again in the distance. Minutes later, the veterans of the camp could be seen waiting for Kora. It had only been 4 minutes since she left. And many thought those short 4 minutes felt like an eternity, as the explosions of battle, bursts of fire, explosions that would have left a baby coughing like atomic bombs. And the last thing they had was what looked like the explosion of a mini supernova. I told them the battle was at a point where if they didn't enter now, they never would. Or that would have been 2 minutes ago, since after that, nothing else happened. So much so that Fletcher's bow disappeared 3 minutes ago. And a moment later a mini sun covered his vision at that moment. Seemingly bored, Clarice threw a rock at the one that had previously divided the blue team from the red team in their battle for the flag. He's already dead, isn't he? Clarice asked, looking bored as they had gone more than 2 minutes without hearing anything. It was just silence and silence along with more silence fused with what? Exactly, silence. The fish cake must have fallen by now, Annabeth said, sighing tiredly. While everyone around her looked at her as a stranger, nothing unusual about her saying things that didn't make sense to the other campers. Fletcher. Fish cake? I asked, raising an eyebrow as I played with a handmade wooden arrow. You made that like a minute ago. Annabeth, fish cake comes from the meaning of his name. Naruto is an abbreviation of Narutomaki, which means fish cake, she said with her gaze still in the distance. They only expected a few minutes before heading out to search for the demigod's body, if there really was a body left, and she doubted it. If the hellhound hadn't come to camp for them, Annabeth deeply doubted it hadn't taken the Hawaiian demigod's body. What impact would this have? The goddess Cain would blame the Greek pantheon, which could lead to a kind of battle between pantheons. The daughter of Athena thought at top speed. In just 2 seconds, she thought of variants, possibilities, alternatives, possible bribes, well-crafted lies, half-truths, even deals to keep the demigods out. Anything that could leave them out of what could possibly be the end of the Greek pantheon. If their information was true, what the Hawaiians called gods were the closest thing to primordial beings, and there were more than 8 million of them. While there were millions more spirits, those would be the equivalent of Greek gods. Greece had many gods, thousands, but if their number of gods fell below the primordial Hawaiian pantheon, their chances of survival were around 2% if they surrendered. Although that was only if a mother had faith that she didn't want to turn off the cemetery because of her son's death. Only if the woman thought beyond the anger at the loss of her only living son. Something impossible. Who's going to see if Kora fainted? Clarice asked with her spear in hand. It's clear she's just in the water looking for a way to heal, but her wound is too bad. Worse than mine, so she won't make it any time soon. The son of the sun spoke, looking at his bandaged foot. An ugly and horrible scar would appear there later. Could I at least walk again soon? I asked, but my words were answered by someone I wasn't expecting. A little, but I'm really no good like this, said the girl wearing a new outfit. It was a blue t-shirt with snow-haired men, and a belt that fell on each side, leaving a seal of lightning passing through a tornado in the middle. Being symbols of who claimed it, only they claimed it, as it was the easiest way to avoid a battle over who would own it in the camp. Having so many ancestor gods isn't very good. All of that along with her moonstone sword, given to her by Lady Artemis when she fought and managed to survive the 100-headed dragon as a sign of good faith to consider joining her hunters. Although he did not accept, he still left him the sword. Fletcher, well, it's late. Maybe it's all over, haven't heard anything for a while. I speak without enthusiasm, accepting the ending that was already decided. If the dog played with both of them, he would have killed Naruto a long time ago, and the silence didn't help. I know, Kora whispered, looking at her foot. Regardless of how much water she used, her wound never improved, and she knew that going out like that would only be a nuisance for the Hawaiian, but she never thought he would fall in 4 minutes. She was an idiot. Annabeth stood up suddenly, shaking her hands and preparing herself. It's about time. I doubt the hellhound hasn't done anything if he's still out there, she said, looking up at the dome the tree in the distance provided as protection. Fletcher, I agree, we have to go see if at least there's anything left. I whispered the last bit, not wanting to say the forbidden words. Good, Kora said, bracing her foot with the handle of her great sword. Clarice, I'll stick with the miners, she said, standing leaning against a tree. She didn't have the best memories with that hellish dog, and the attacks she witnessed from the camp only worsened her slight fear of those creatures. Everyone nodded. Kora walked first, her foot planted as she felt the pain with each step. But she simply ignored it because it wasn't the focus of the issue. She could recover later in a lake. Walking, everyone looked at the clouds of dust that had emerged after so many explosions and attacks. It looked like a minefield, and the mines were atomic bombs, with the power of the Tsar atomic bomb squared and multiplied by the cube. Fletcher said jokingly, though it was a dry joke that didn't even make him laugh. Regardless of how strong a demigod manages to be, divine beings will always be superior by nature. Annabeth spoke with a happy frown. Heracles is the best example. He only managed to complete several of his labors once he ascended to heaven. His only success against the divine being was over the 100-headed dragon, and even then, he only managed to trick Atlas into doing it for him, and then trick him into holding up the sky and Mount Olympus again. I already told you to let him sleep, you idiot. The group heard a familiar voice in the distance, and another voice responded, although they did not hear very well what the second voice said because it spoke in a lower, more normal tone than the first voice. Stop fighting, you two. You look like little girls. And stop trying to kiss someone while they're unconscious. Kora opened her eyes at that. That voice. Annabeth frowned. My. Chapter 15. Annabeth frowned. What are they doing here? She thought, frowning, hoping it wasn't what she thought. If Azula could use the control of the dead who had fallen in battle and used it on Naruto, it would be the worst possible thing in the camp. Kora had the same thoughts in her head, though she was going to do it like the worst thing she could do to someone like Naruto. So without waiting for a sign or warning, she caused a hurricane to arise and swirled all the dust from the battle. And as that happened, several people could be seen, which confused the group. Azula. On the battlefield was the same Azula, standing there with a smile looking straight at Naruto. He was unconscious at Nani's feet, who was just stroking his hair while sleeping. While Mai, Katara, and Moana were apparently trying to keep Tylee away from the sleeping child, I had to guess. Several in the group would think it was because of the scream about a kiss from earlier or something. Kora angrily approached Azula, who was smiling like she normally did. What are you doing here? Azula looked at the brunette, and gave her her arrogant smile. What? Do you really think I'd wait for your stupid leg to heal before going out? I needed to see how the demigod did. The girl smiled. And that was a great ending. The girl smiled as she looked behind them, where the Hellhound's corpse lay. Kora and the others, barely noticing, stared at the unimaginable. He KKK at it? The words couldn't quite leave Fletcher's lips due to the shock, amazement, and shock of the scene. Kora, how this happened? You said they were both losing, but now he's alive and well while the hound is dead. Kora didn't respond to Annabeth's question as she stared in amazement at Naruto and the dog. The dog had giant bruises on its face, holes crisscrossing its figure, burns, missing parts like its left front leg, and the large gash that separated half of its body in two. Kora, all this was done by him. Naruto really did it. The girl didn't know what to think. Everything seemed so surreal that her mind was thinking of any other truth except the one in front of her face. It was true. Katara, what happened? She asked in an authoritarian manner, and it was the girl looking at her niece/cousin. Did any of you notice anything when you got here? Katara was about to answer, but someone interrupted her. No, when we left, everyone was already like that, Mai said, her face still serious. While Tylee tried to cling to the sleeping Hawaiian, she was only stopped by Katara, who was trying to pull the old ghost away from the sleeping boy. Miss Nani, could you explain what the hell happened here? Kora looked at Nani, who was still playing with the boy's dirty, yet somehow supernaturally clean hair. Before that, we should take him somewhere else to sleep. This isn't the place for this conversation. Kora nodded, so she moved her hand, and the wind began to lift the body, leaving Nani free to get up and start walking back to camp. That was the plan, as a light seemed to change the atmosphere. Everything seemed to change instantly. The sunlight dimmed as a cold, shadowy aura covered the entire fenced area, its presence felt even by ordinary humans 70 kilometers away. From all this gloomy atmosphere, a woman emerged. She was a redhead with dark hair, wearing a tiara on her forehead of a shining silver color, along with those eyes of the same color. His attire consisted of a dark gray jacket and dark yen pants. He wore a large robe with a lion-like collar and darker gray sleeves. On his sword was a black arrow holder with arrows that glittered together in the light reflecting off them. And crossing from her left shoulder to the right side of her waist was an arch just as planetary as all the above. This was Artemis in her adult mortal form. The redhead looked around and her sight fell on the large wolf split from face to tail, with giant holes crossing its torso and burns along its destroyed body. The goddess didn't seem to be fazed beyond a slight look of surprise in her eyes that no one but Nani noticed. I have to assume you didn't do this. So where is the culprit? The goddess's voice seemed like a summer breeze, so calm was it. It held no authority or superiority, just a simple, straightforward command that anyone would want to reveal. That's it, Lady Artemis. Kora couldn't finish because she didn't want to confirm what she didn't know. Everything was going to be Naruto. But it was so surreal that it was more likely that Nani herself intervened, and she won't reveal it because she's not part of the pantheon. Young Naruto is the culprit, though it's a surprise to me as well. I didn't think I'd be able to fight someone of this caliber so soon. Nani's gaze, accompanied by a small, calm smile, fell upon Artemis's curious but uninterested eyes. This boy? The goddess looked at the demigod named Naruto. His condition, though unconscious, was naturally fine, with no injuries, no energy drain, no visible fatigue, or anything that would indicate he had even exerted himself in his fight. It seemed like it was all a massacre of the demigod towards the hound. Sigh. Artemis's gaze closed calmly, then reopened with no interest, still visible to any normal person. Fine, since my presence here is no longer necessary, I will leave. The goddess looked at the boy. Artemis, young Kora, I would like you to inform Naruto about a conversation with me. Perhaps around the summer solstice or later, I would like to speak with him. He said as his body began to fade from view, slowly disappearing into a lunar glow. If it's not a problem, may I know why you want to talk to young Naruto? Nani asked, surprising the demigods by questioning a goddess. Not even Azula was so mentally ill as to think of doing something like that. Nothing serious. Apparently, he's no ordinary person. I'd like to make you a simple proposition, she said calmly as her disappearance was voluntarily slowed. That would be impossible if that's what I think. All the demigods were surprised by what the water spirit/goddess said. If you want young Naruto as one of your hunters, you should assure him that Naruto, even if he accepts, could not be under your command. Artemis, what makes you think that? Because he couldn't be my hunter like. Nani, his mother won't let him, it's that simple. Nani's smile widened slightly. Her eyes seemed to turn dark blue, challenging any words from Artemis about the authority of the leader of their pantheon. Meanwhile, on Artemis's side, she didn't really understand what was being said. She mentioned the boy's mother as if going to find her mother would be absolute death, or going to her would be impossible in itself. Artemis sighed, not wanting to start anything unnecessarily here. Who are you? Or rather, what are you, and why are you here? The moon goddess's cold words caused the previously calm atmosphere to change to a heavy one. A mere glance from the moon goddess was enough to make one think that the world, no, all existence would end with a single out-of-place word. So much was the shock that Naruto's body couldn't be supported by Kora and her current lack of environmental control. Yet, as if out of nowhere, a pillow of water caused Naruto's body to not touch the deserted ground. Although Nani wasn't even remotely affected, that was obvious. One was a representative avatar of the moon goddess in a human body, and the other was a simple form that suppressed your power, your true form, and most importantly, your presence. Nani, I am a water spirit, spirit of the calm sea. Sister of the stormy water spirit. I am Akua Y Nani. Nani's words seemed to provoke something. It wasn't the typical uproar that comes with even the common or disrespectful mention of God. No, it was more like an order from the world itself. The world resounded at the mention of the goddess. Artemis, a Hawaiian goddess in Greek territory, this isn't very common, she said, not caring about what happened a few minutes ago. Although she recognized him by name, she knew he was from Hawaii because of the name, and calling herself a spirit even though she was a goddess. This conversation will remain the same until the demigod speaks, Artemis said, and her disappearance ended, vanishing completely, leaving any letter of a word that would have come out of either of them to vanish into thin air. Everyone stood there, unable to really say anything. The whole thing was so sudden and shocking that it didn't seem possible. Nothing that happened today was really possible. Nani, I think we should go back. There's a lot to do and more to explain. The woman's smile didn't fade when everyone around her understood what she'd said and got back to work. Air swirled from beneath Naruto, lifting him from the water that held him, and everyone followed suit again. Some time later, inside Hero's hut, Naruto could be seen lying on a bed, seemingly unconscious. Moana and Nanny stood beside him, staring at the sleeping boy. The boy had been like that for a while, but since he wasn't like that because of fatigue, pain, or damage, they didn't have a good way to wake him up in any way. Meanwhile, outside the cabin, the campers were feeling better now, and they seemed better in every way. Kora's foot was healed, as was Fletcher's, thanks to Nanny. Even Percy had woken up after several nights. "Nothing new," Moana said, leaving the tent. Apparently, the two of them could enter, perhaps on behalf of hers, meaning to take care of the boy, or through the work of Nanny herself, who knows. "Kora, at this rate, could I wake up by the summer solstice?" Moana shrugged. "We don't know, but Nanny says you don't have to worry," she said calmly, because it wouldn't be the first time Nanny had a plan or a way to help, something she only did when it was absurdly necessary because she was a goddess. And she helped mortals whenever they had a problem that was bigger than average. Kora sighed. Too much time had passed, and she knew this could spell trouble with the search for Zeus's lightning. If Naruto didn't awaken, he would be instantly killed by the god, who wouldn't even be stopped by his current state. "Clarice, don't worry so much, Kora, that won't help at all." The daughter of Ares held her spear as support for her body. She was so bored that not even Percy by her side, someone she hated, generated interest in her at the moment. "Kora, I know, but I'm too worried. Would Zeus even consider her current state when considering her punishment? That is clearly impossible." Kora looked at Annabeth. "Both Zeus and all the gods know that he couldn't have done that. Regardless of how many abilities would have served him, it would still be impossible for him to do it because of his presence. So this is more like Lord Zeus getting even for what happened to Lady Hera." Everyone already knew that, it was obvious. After all, Zeus wasn't the least beloved god of Greece for nothing. Even Hades, whom the monsters hated endlessly. He was less hated than Zeus himself, since he had no excuse to do anything, he just did it because he was him. "Moana, it's best if we just wait. Talking won't help much. Don't you think helping the surrounding spirits is better?" Everyone remembered the group most affected of all. The nature spirits had lost most of their home, as most of the forest was completely erased, leaving them, in addition to thousands of losses, without a settled home. "Kora, Moana's right. It's better to find a way to help them than just mope around here. Bring the children of the water and the sun, and the fields too." The order was carried out, as the group of demigods dispersed so they could search and help in any way they could. "So what's all this?" Kora's question was directed at Moana, the two of them the only ones in the group of campers. "They appear out of nowhere without warning or a satyr to guide them, strong and well-trained. With a spirit that's truly a goddess. But zero information about anything around here. And worse, with the pretext of going back." Moana shrugged. "We're doing the goddess of marriage a favor," she said simply, shrugging. It wasn't really that important. No one said that information was hidden, did they? Chapter 16. Naruto was fast asleep, while outside the cold night hit the camp and the surroundings, which were deeply silent except for one specific place. The dark-haired man slowly began to wake up, opening his eyes as he let out a deep sigh that seemed more like sleep than anything else. "A long nap after almost dying is always good, right?" Young Naruto. Naruto looked to his side where Nanny was calmly perched. "Oh, Nanny," he greeted, looking around. He noticed he was in Hera's hut, which was just as delicate as the first time he'd been there. "How long did I sleep?" "Nanny, 2 days, young Naruto." Naruto nodded. The boy got out of bed, noticing that he was barely wearing boxers as underwear, albeit a golden sheen, and then he had on beach shorts as usual. Naruto stood there for about 2 seconds, seemingly lost, then snorted and looked away. "Do you know what happened to the hound?" I asked, looking at the spirit at his side. "He defeated him." Naruto was surprised by his answers. "Me? But I fainted at." The boy interrupted himself and began to remember how many hits he endured after wanting to fight seriously against the beast from hell. 6, 7. After the 7th hit I fainted," she said, pointing her fingers at her friend and childhood caregiver. "That's a story for another day." Annie smiled, though it didn't seem to be a truly happy smile. Naruto shrugged. If you say so, fine. Naruto gave a thumbs up and then left the cabin, noting that there didn't seem to be anyone around the cabins. Or maybe everyone was just asleep, since judging by the moon, it was incredibly late. Naruto, huh? Is there really no one there? How boring. The boy crossed his arms, and behind him, Nani just giggled a little, amused by his actions. I think there are still some left in the center. Naruto smiled at the water spirit. Thank you very much, he said to the goddess with a smile. Nani, young Naruto, I'll have to be away with you for a few days. I have to return to your mother to inform her about a few things. Don't get into trouble while I'm gone. Naruto was confused as the goddess vanished into disappearing drops of water. Well, whatever. Goodbye. He said goodbye with a smile, knowing that the goddess was no longer there. Leaving his farewell, he looked to where a dim light shone from what appeared to be a campfire. Well, let's go there. He smiled as he ran off toward it, though he didn't expect it to happen in a single instant. He traveled 8 times as far as he had before at this same normal speed, which led to him crashing head-on into a rock, shattering on impact. That hurt, he whispered, looking at the distance between where he was before and where he was now. He only used a small percentage of his speed, but it seemed like he actually used up to 8 times more than he intended. The boy stood up and looked around in confusion, as if his perception of things seemed different, which it was. Suddenly, my head hurts, he whispered, looking around in confusion, and suddenly fell to the ground unconscious, lying there for a few minutes. Until a shadow with a ponytail slowly approached. Since I said that's not true, I'm not going for just any man, said one of the approaching voices, sounding like a lump of sugar from the emotion pouring from its voice. No, another voice replied. You're going for any humanoid being, regardless of gender, the second voice said, sounding calm and collected in its tone. My, stop saying that, it's going to ruin my reputation. My, more than you degraded her yourself, I think it's impossible, Ty Lee. The second one, now recognized as Mai, daughter of Hephaestus, replied to her friend Ty Lee, daughter of Hermes. Ty Lee, you're just jealous. The girl grumbled, walking past the ruined rocks. I don't need to call the attention of every boy in the camp like you do. They're all equally stupid, the daughter of the forge said calmly. Ty Lee, if, after all, you just want to get Zook's attention. Before she could finish, the girl tripped over a rock, falling onto the back of the sleeping and unconscious Naruto. Who the hell left that there? She cursed in annoyance until she noticed where she was standing. Huh! The girl's back was covered in tattoos where she was lying, and she was surprised. Isn't that the new demigod who fought the hound? Ty Lee, if it's him, what's he doing sleeping here? He wasn't in his cabin, I asked doubtfully. The boy shouldn't be here. What do we do? She asked her friend, who was the better of the two at rationing. Take him to his cabin, the dark-haired woman with golden eyes said in her calm tone. Ty Lee, and do you think the goddess Hera will let us into her cabin? I asked, raising an eyebrow in mockery of the obviousness of the proposal. Then leave it at the entrance, the girl said simply, sounding annoyed. Ty Lee smiled and shook her head, refusing to anger her friend. Better help me take him to my cabin, she said, trying to lift the boy, but barely managing to raise his hand and a little of his shoulder. How heavy? How much does he weigh? He whispered, straining to try to lift the boy higher, and just when he thought he'd succeeded, he noticed that he was actually lifted by 2 mini rock pillars from Mai. I'll do it, you just walk, he said, making a rectangular platform take the boy. And they raised the platform with 2 pillars, made long circles appear underneath, allowing it to roll freely on them. And so, I managed to roll the platform to a cabin far from the others. A cabin a bit small compared to the others, but still a good size for several demigods. Mai moved her hand, causing the earth to move and placed Naruto over the entrance, and with one movement, a strong blow from a rock pillar made him enter definitively. Ty Lee looked at her friend with a drop of sweat. What? It won't hurt if everything we saw about him hurts something. The daughter of the forge shrugged, heading deeper into the cabin. That inside had a few demigods surprised by the body of the boy in the room. "Hello?" Ty Lee greeted his half-siblings, while Mai entered behind them with her usual disinterested face. "What's Lee doing here, Naruto? He was in his cabin a few hours ago." "Wait. Don't tell me you kidnapped him. You're crazy." The girl in Japanese clothes looked at Luke, her older half-brother, with an angry face for accusing her without even knowing. "For your information, he is." I didn't kidnap him. He was lying on the way here in the demon of the destruction of Lord D's stone." Luke sighed because the news that was meant to calm him down ended up stressing him out even more. "And why did they bring you here?" he asked, noticing his anger at what was happening. "Unless you have hope that Hera would open her doors to the daughter of her disappointment and one of her bastard children, I suppose it was the best option," Ty Lee replied, arms crossed. "Luke, fine, just lay him down on one of the beds in the back," said the blonde with the scar on his cheek calmly, and his half-sister gave him a smile that confused him. "I'll put him to sleep with me," the girl replied, making Luke's sweat drop. "Whatever you want, Lee, just make sure you don't get me in trouble for this." With that, the boy grabbed his special sword and left the cabin. What's so special about this cabin for the recognized children of Hermes? If they'll all get in the end? The blonde thought angrily. The cabin wasn't recognized as one, but it was built so the children of God wouldn't have to suffer because of other demigods who, after all, weren't anything like them. "You're not even good for that." He spoke to the air to turn around and leave the path directly to the camp, and head behind the cabin, getting lost in the little forest that still covered the inside of the camp. Ty Lee, well, who lifts it? The other occupants of the cabin closed the doors to their separate rooms, leaving the main room empty. "Fine, Mai and I will," she whispered, annoyed seeing that no one else wanted to help her. "And then we'll take a bath." She smiled at her friend, who said nothing, either accepted nor refused. Typical of her. "Just let me read my book in peace this time, Tai," she replied calmly as she raised her hand, and a bit of dirt rose up along with the wood on the floor, moving Naruto towards the door at the back, where she left him and left, re-entering through the opening in the floor. Not before sealing it with the wood he raised. Later. The girl was sitting on the floor leaning on her own bed, where Naruto was sleeping soundly, while next to her was Mai reading a book and drinking tea calmly. And entering the room, wearing ordinary clothes, she was surprised. "A big surprise you have there, Ty Lee, don't you think?" Hermes' daughter nodded. "She passed out on Mr. D's rock, perhaps, and woke up but for some reason fell unconscious again," the girl said, touching the sleeping Hawaiian's right cheek while holding her video game controller with her other hand. Azula looked at the boy and smiled, her hand igniting with the blue fire of war as she smiled. "Step out of the way." She told Ty Lee that she was confused. "What are you planning on doing?" she asked, looking at her friend, who smiled even wider than before. "A little invitation from my side. I'm taking advantage of the opportunity where it'll be just us. So I should have woken him up in a more effective way." The girl smiled at the sleeping Naruto's neutral face. "These temperatures won't kill you, but they will leave you with the pain you must be feeling," she said as her fire stopped floating above her hand and instead adhered to it completely. Resisting the heat, Azula placed her hand on Naruto's chest, and the fire seemed to ignore his skin, flesh, and bones, reaching right into his chest, where his heart, like a flashlight, lit up from within his body in a Machiavellian and terrifying shade of blue. As if through X-rays, the boy's heart became visible to the naked eye. "Who said learning how to translate subatomic particles through matter would be useless?" the daughter of war thought to herself. "My, and what do you plan to do with that?" "I will set his heart on fire." That surprised Ty Lee and Mai. They looked at each other, not entirely sure that something like that would be done. "Are you sure that's not very dangerous?" "I'm not Artemis's daughter, but I'm sure that's dangerous," she said, a little scared of what might happen. "Athena," Mai said bluntly, confusing Ty Lee. "You mean Athena, right? Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, Artemis of strategy and intelligence in general." Ty Lee nodded at Mai. "You get the point," the daughter of the god of thieves said calmly. "Don't worry, Kora made it clear that she has very high regeneration. Even so, regeneration is usually more about arms and feet or organs in general, but we don't know if it needs your head or heart. They're vital parts of the human body, so it might need them for regeneration to work in the first place. Mai looked at her childhood friend, a little hesitant. It's always good to discover new things. The daughter of Ares smiled cruelly. Her heart, which until now had only shone with blue fire, now it glowed like a bonfire. Although the fire did not seem to come from the boy's body, it did seem to have an effect on his heart itself, which began to light up even more than before, resembling a sun inside the black-haired man's chest, although that same brightness disappeared around the edges, making it clear how it was already beginning to cook completely. Internal attacks are always more useful than external ones, due to the common order of the physical body. The body's toughness comes from the skin, muscles, flesh, and bones. But all of this is resilient because what's fragile lies beneath. Organs, fragile parts of the human body, yet the most vital. The girl attacked the second weakest of all, the heart, since even the brain could withstand more impacts than the heart, and only the liver surpassed it. Azula knew all this, and that's why she decided to learn to control pain directly instead of just the fire formed by it. By doing this, she set her enemies on fire without even touching them, as she sets their bodies and other parts on fire from the inside out without having to make contact. Aren't you awake? Let's go get something hotter. Ty Lee, is this safe, Mai? Azula will stop eventually. Right. Mai didn't respond or flinch. As Azula's smile opened, as warmth lit up the boy's entire chest, as the part of his heart seemed to grow dimmer and dimmer. She didn't care if he died, it was even better than being alive, since that way he would be another servant, which would make up for the Cerberus she couldn't get. Or so she thought, as a stone-covered hand rose up and stopped her own hand on Naruto's chest. Chapter 17. Azula glared at Mai, who had stopped her fiery awakening in the Hawaiian, who stopped, causing the blue fire to disappear from the boy's body, letting any internal wounds disappear again. And before anyone could speak or comment on Mai's actions, the cabin door opened, drawing Azula and Ty Lee's attention. Who is it? Ty Lee asked as he opened the door, revealing a gray-eyed girl staring. Are you light on your feet? Does that mean I messed up again? Ty Lee, Toph, you really should get a guide. This shouldn't become routine, especially at this time of night. Toph is a girl who is possibly 16 or 15 years old. Having dull gray eyes due to her lack of vision, she had hair like her mother, being a bun in the back, leaving a fringe on her forehead covering her null vision. His clothing was loose-fitting green, with a sandy yellow flannel that ended like a blanket, and was covered by a black belt with gold buttons. Meanwhile, both his hands and feet had green sleeves with black and gold trim. Toph smiled a little mockingly. Whatever you say, just lead me home for now, she said, her face turning slightly in one direction, though it turned back to face Ty Lee in front of her. Sigh. I'm surprised how you managed to get here but not to Demeter's cabin. Ty Lee took the hand of the 16-year-old November girl, Toph, and led her out of the cabin, leaving Mai, Azula, and the unconscious Naruto alone. You should be more careful when you do this. Next time we won't be so lucky. Mai spoke calmly, while looking at her rock hand that was melted by Azula's flames. Who even seemed to notice his words. Fine, let him sleep. Maybe he won't wake up until some undetermined date. The dark-haired, golden-eyed daughter of Ares left the cabin of the children of Hermes and left the daughter of Hephaestus with the unconscious Hawaiian. It seems he didn't suffer any lasting damage. Mai checked to see that nothing was damaged externally. You guys would be in a lot of trouble if someone else was there, you know? Mai's cold golden eyes opened to stare at a dark-skinned boy with brown eyes and medium-length black hair. Chris. Mai looked at the unrecognizable but almost obvious son of Hermes. What are you doing here? Chris, I'm the son of the god Hermes. That's the most obvious thing ever said. He didn't claim me, though. He said the last part, annoyed, while crossing his hands. Mai, that doesn't change anything, she said calmly as a blade appeared in her sleeves, while Chris, who was also looking at them, smiled. Would that work? I suddenly asked, still standing next to Mai, who had the edge of the knife inches from Chris's neck. Being the son of Hermes doesn't make you untouchable. You're as predictable as your brothers, the daughter of Hephaestus said calmly as she stepped away from the boy. You won't reveal anything about what happened here, and everyone will be fine. He said it as if it were an order, giving no right to the unrecognized son of the god of thieves to give an opinion. I don't like this deal. Why don't you give me something more important? Forge me a weapon out of bronze and tempered steel. No. She spoke calmly as she turned to leave the cabin. If you're talking about Luke, he had the honor of ordering a weapon made to his liking. Make something as big as him, and then make your request. Left the angry boy, while she herself left the room, leaving the sleeping Naruto with Chris, who looked at the unconscious Naruto. So do you like pizza? Chris spoke to the unconscious Naruto, who obviously didn't respond, leaving the boy standing there, not knowing what to do. I should talk to Luke. I'm not good at making decisions, he thought, rubbing his head. Maybe they could use what he knew as information against Azula or something like that. The boy went back into his room, leaving Ty Lee's room alone, with only the sleeping Naruto. I'm back in. Ty Lee's cheerful words slowly fell away as she saw no one else in her room. Seriously, they just left. The girl slumped. Now she'd have to clean her room and bathe herself. The latter is the worst, she thought with crocodile tears, though her face fell on Naruto's. At least we'll sleep together, sweetie. He told Naruto that he didn't react because of his condition. Ty Lee didn't mind, and he left it to go to the bathroom. He didn't expect a good reaction either, much less a reaction of his own accord. The next day. It was another day, where the long-haired, black-haired Naruto and Ty Lee, who was barely wearing a blue pajama, were sleeping snuggled up together. Anyone who saw their position would think they were two brothers sleeping together because of the silly and disorganized way they were. I'm going to kill her when she wakes up. Kora's voice was heard just outside Toph's bedroom door. Toph and Annabeth were standing there, staring at the sleeping Naruto and Ty Lee, unaware of the girl's presence. I wonder how I get into the cabin, Annabeth thought, looking at Ty Lee. It was technically impossible to enter a god's hut without that god's permission, and he doubted with all his might that Hera had simply opened the door for Ty Lee to steal an unconscious Naruto and drag him through the nighttime camp, possibly destroying Mr. D's substitute rock. Naruto, grilled megalodon, delicious. A drop of sweat came out of Kora as she saw Naruto bite one of the feet of the sleeping Ty Lee, who without losing sleep, still kicked Naruto's jaw, making him stop biting her foot. Annabeth, should we wake them up? Kora, Naruto seems to be fine now, so we should let him sleep as long as his body needs, she said, smiling calmly, a smile that disappeared in an instant. But Ty Lee is a different story. Grabbing one of the girl's feet, Kora forcefully pulled Ty Lee out of the bed where Naruto was left alone. Really? Kora smiled at Ty Lee on her back, who was still asleep even as her pajama top began to fall off, revealing her pink brow. Just wake her up first. Annabeth stroked her forehead with a drop of sweat, watching as Kora just ignored her and continued on her way out of the unofficial cabin of the children of Hermes. Kora? Both girls stopped walking and turned around, only to see Naruto stretch out, having already taken a long yawn from an even longer sleep. I'm not the smartest or anything, but since when is my room so red? Kora, well, that's because… Annabeth, you're in the room of a son of Hermes. Do you know how you ended up here? Kora frowned at being stopped from her less straightforward explanation, more fitting for someone barely awake from what would only fall into the category of a coma. Naruto thought for a few seconds, going over everything he had in his mind this time. I woke up last night before Nanny came back with Mom. I moved towards where you were supposed to be, but I felt dizzy, and that's why I crashed into something, presumably something hard. After that, everything was distortions, a place I didn't know, something else my mind was just beginning to understand, and here I am. Annabeth, that's no use to me, I whisper, thinking that. So you just woke up and fell unconscious again, I ask, summarizing everything. And Naruto, confused, just nodded. Okay, thanks, Annabeth said as she turned around. It wasn't the information she was expecting. And it wasn't a big deal either, although she still had one question. Because he just fainted. Naruto, hey Kora, what's for dinner? Kora, are you hungry? Naruto smiled nervously. Something like that, my mouth is sour. Kora said, her mouth feeling tasteless, something she didn't like. Well, you could get some breakfast if you get there on time. Before Naruto could finish, he had already taken off at high speed. Puh. Annabeth looked at where the boy was and where he should be. Did you notice anything different about him too? Annabeth asked, frowning. Kora shook her head. It all looks the same to me, too similar to be true. But I don't see anything different. Zeus's champion said calmly. Why? Did you see anything specific? Annabeth nodded. Nothing, it's just a little strange. When I try to focus my mind on his figure, it seems impossible to notice. I just make him dizzy, she whispered, frowning, since the boy's figure was normal. But also a little strange. Kora, maybe it's because you're still sleepy. Don't worry about camp. If you need to, you can sleep whenever you want, she said calmly, although she suddenly felt a movement on her shoulder. And when she regained consciousness, she barely noticed the daughter of Hermes on her shoulders. She'd completely forgotten about the formerly sleeping Ty Lee. What's wrong? I'm sure I didn't fall asleep face down today. The girl whispered sleepily, sweat dropping from Annabeth and Kora's lips. Today? They thought at the same time, looking at each other in confusion. Later. A few minutes after waking up, Naruto could be seen asleep again on top of the trees, at the top of them, taking in the sunlight head-on. Which didn't seem to affect the black-haired boy's sleep, as he just slept, unaware of everything happening around him. Is it normal for someone to sleep so much after falling unconscious for days? Katara asked, standing next to Kora, who were watching the boy from a distance. The Hawaiian simply arrived at the cafeteria at high speed, took a lot of food and disappeared, or so many thought, since no one could see when he entered or left the cafeteria due to his speed. I'd say so, but I'm not very smart at this, Kora replied, as she began to use the air to support herself and begin to float. It wasn't something she was quite good at, but she could do enough to lift herself up into a tree. Kora, regardless of whether he's good or bad, it's best to wake him up and ask him what happened in the battle, she said, landing beside the boy. And without much importance, she kicked him, sending him falling to the ground, right next to Katara, who looked at her aunt/cousin's actions with her eyes rolled back in her head. Really? Kora, what? Katara shook her head. Leave him alone. But that didn't wake him up in the slightest. She looked at the sleeping boy, who remained just as calm. Do you think he's dead? Kora, I doubt it. She's still breathing, even if it's a little less than the others. Katara, then why doesn't he wake up? I asked, poking the boy with a water stick. Maybe the floor is heavy, if that's the case. We just have to do more extreme things, I said, as a dome of water quickly appeared from the plants and fell onto Naruto's face. Barely feeling it, the boy jumped from his lying position to a sitting position in seconds. Ready, Kora said, looking at the confused Naruto. My head hurts, Naruto said, a little confused. Why did you wake me up? I asked, looking at Kora. There are so many important things to discuss. And time is getting shorter, we can't waste any more time, I explained calmly, then shake the boy's hand, who takes it to help them stand up again. Towering over Kora at 1.82 meters, Kora's 1.74 meters. Is it just me, or are you shorter now? Kora, I think it's you. I don't see anything. Dojo, noticing that she wasn't that different from last time. Although he could tell she was actually shorter, nothing so exaggerated as to be emphasized. Naruto looked at Katara and smiled. Oh, it's you again. How are you? Naruto walked over to look at the girl more closely, even tilting his face to look at her head on. Fine, I guess, Katara greeted, slightly nervous. Kora, have you guys known each other before? Naruto, yeah, he snuck into my bed while I was in the Hermes cabin, he replied with a smile, not noticing the embarrassment he left Katara in. And no, it wasn't exactly like that. I can explain it, and that's not what happened. I tried to explain the matter to Kora's dubious gaze. Really? Kora asked hesitantly. No. The daughter of Triton, king of the sea and son of Poseidon, said, looking away in embarrassment. The three of them remained silent for a few seconds before breaking off. Don't we have something to do? Naruto asked hesitantly, which unwittingly helped both girls break the awkward silence. Kora, yes, he replied, remembering that the veterans were waiting for his arrival. And do you know where Nani is exactly? Because she left or something? Naruto started walking behind Kora and Katara, thinking of a possibility. Knowing that she went to visit Mom, possibly to tell her about my battle with the dog. Kora, and why would a goddess tell her anything about your mother? Because you know your mother in the first place? I asked hesitantly. If her mother had a connection to the goddess, it was because she was one. So why did Naruto have a connection with her? Why wouldn't I have any connection to her? She's my mother. I've known her since birth, he said, confused about that aspect of the girl. Wait, you don't know your mother? Kora, what? No, I mean yes. If I know my mother, I mean because you know your godly father when that is totally forbidden on Olympus. Naruto, that? And why is it forbidden in Olympus? Kora rolled her eyes. Because Zeus wanted it that way. Naruto nodded doubtfully. Just because someone loved him doesn't mean they don't know his parents. Even if he was their king, and that wasn't bad. Well, it's not like I know everything about it. Maybe it's because I'm not from the Greek pantheon, she replied, earning the confused looks of both demigoddesses. Wait, what? You're not Greek? Naruto shook his head. I'm Hawaiian, Naruto. You didn't notice, I even have a story. The first son of the goddess Cain and the first between the earth and the sky. That's what it was called if I remember correctly. He whispered the last part to himself, remembering that part about himself. Kora and Katara never heard of that. They said at the same time, taking out a tic that made Naruto angry. Don't say it like that either, he said, his face blank. So, do you know the story of Moi? He asked, hesitantly, and a little hopeful of being recognized by his alter ego. Katara, all I know is that he's an idiot who steals from his younger brothers because he was a terrible fisherman. Naruto slumped. I was only 10 when I did that, he thought, remembering something like that. Besides, my story has much more to it than just being a fish thief to his family. I also created the Hawaiian Islands, the solar system, and granted the sea to the ancient humans. That should be much more important, he said with his arms crossed. You, Naruto, still don't get it? I mean, I am Moi, or rather, my alter ego in the tale of the thief fisherman. I prefer the original version of my story, but the other one was written by my younger brother, so it's not that bad either. Katara, that's impossible, she said, not believing anything he'd said. If that's true, you should have died years ago, she said, denying that possibility, although Kora didn't seem to be in the same boat. If you read my story, maybe you'd know, but I'm immortal. I'm over 2,600 eons old, he said, arms crossed. Katara raised an eyebrow. He didn't create you, prove it. Naruto rolled his eyes. How do you prove you've been alive since the solar system emerged? How do you do that? Katara shrugged. You're the one who should be testing, not me, she said calmly with a victorious smile, leaving Naruto's face blank. The lack of evidence makes it either outright false or simply impossible to prove? He didn't know, and it's better not to think about it. It would be a bigger headache than he already had. While Naruto and Katara discussed their topic, Kora seemed to be deep in her mind thinking about everything she heard, and she didn't dislike it as much as she thought now. Fletcher had already told him something similar, older than Cronus, that said it all. Cronus was born on Olympus, before humans emerged, and if Naruto was older, that must put him before humanity. But so much so that he created the solar system himself, even though it must have been just an exaggeration or misinterpretation, as most tales of the gods tended to be. Or was it? How strong was Naruto? Did he ever see his limit? Sigh. It doesn't matter, we're here, she said calmly as she looked at the cabin where everyone would be, the cafeteria, and the only place where any demigod independent of their divine father could be besides Hermes' cabin, a very populated place and difficult for them to talk without annoying third parties. Chapter 18. The conversation about the battle with the son of Cerberus ended. Though it wasn't much, to be honest, since Naruto himself could only narrate up to a certain point, where after that, he said nothing. He lost consciousness and didn't know what else happened. So they all came to the conclusion that the same thing happened to him as to Kora when she lost to him in the fight, though they still didn't have a valid reason for why that happened. They also didn't have a hypothesis to start theories about, so the conversation ended there. With the conversation over, Naruto and the other veterans could be seen leaving the dining room. And Naruto left with Katara, since after finishing, they both resumed the discussion they had been discussing earlier. And for that reason, the lack of evidence to refute his existence proves his existence. The young Katara told the black-haired man, who nodded thoughtfully. Naruto, but that's contradictory. Existence isn't proven by not being able to refute it, but by not being able to refute the evidence that proves its existence. So you must first provide proof of its existence, and without evidence to refute it, its existence is proven. Katara, that means? Naruto shrugged. I don't know, I've forgotten why we started arguing in the first place. The boy placed his hands behind his head without concern, though a voice behind him made him stand next to the brunette with the blue streaks. Kora. He greeted the girl who was approaching his position. Aren't you two standing too close together? Naruto and Katara looked at each other doubtfully, then both shrugged. I think we're fine. Is something wrong? Kora shook her head. Nothing, I just wanted to remind you that the time to search for Zeus's lightning bolt is getting shorter, she said in a serious tone, which Naruto noticed very easily. But instead of worrying, he just nodded. Don't worry, I'll start searching for the lightning tomorrow, he agreed, while Percy, behind him, listened to his words and grew frightened. Tomorrow? Isn't that too soon? I mean, we have 6 days. There's time, right? Grover, at his side, shook his head. Several places in the world have different space-time realms, which stretch time to a point where those 6 days could just as easily be a year or a second. Percy was surprised. Does that mean we could simply get stranded 100 years later when we go to one of those realms? The son of Poseidon literally turned blue at the thought of that possibility. Percy, we need to start as soon as possible, today if possible. Grover, Mr. Naruto already said it was tomorrow, why do you want to go today? Percy, this way we'll have more time, and going with him doesn't sound right to me, he said, looking at Naruto, who seemed so carefree it was scary. He probably won't take it seriously, and that will only slow us down. Grover, that may be true, but wouldn't your power help you pass many tests? Percy thought about it, and while it was true, the mere thought of dying from the boy's attack scared him even more. His power was simply absurd, and he knew he could die if he got into combat with someone else and ended up in the middle of it. I'll find a way to do it on my own, he said calmly, remembering Luke had spoken to him a while ago. And I have a little help, so it shouldn't be difficult, he said, as a breeze passed by him, making him shiver with cold, along with Grover. Well, then do it quickly. Because otherwise, the satyr left the word hanging in the air, while the cold made the struggle between the sky and the sea felt. Later. It was already night, and you could see Percy and Grover with a backpack on his back. Both boys and Saturo were sneaking through the small forest that remained within the camp, and while doing so, they occasionally had to hide behind a rock or tree, since nature spirits abounded within the barrier that kept the demigods safe. Both boys were already at the barrier's exit, if not for Grover, whose awkward steps, due to his crow's feet, falling while Percy stopped in front of him. Grover tried to stand up, but a hand helped him up from behind him. Thanks, Percy. The satyr thanked his friend, though as he stood up, he looked at Percy in front of him with a surprised look, and noticing this, he looked to his side and met Kora's cold, serious gaze. Trying to leave without Mr. D's permission deserves a severe punishment, you know that, don't you, Grover? The satyr was startled by the girl's tone of voice, though his friend quickly stepped in to help him. Grover didn't do anything. Any punishment should fall on me, he said, stopping Kora, who shook her head as if she'd expected something like that. Kora, Who's the one who's centuries old? Percy was confused by the question. What? Kora shook her head. Just answer, she said seriously. Percy, Grover, but the... He was again stopped by Zeus's champion. Who is leading whom? Percy, Grover guides me, but that... Kora, who took the oath to follow the rules and instruct the younger demigods. Already resigned, the son of Poseidon spoke. Grover. Kora nodded. He's the one who takes the blame because he's the one who should be instructing you. If he sees you doing something so stupid, he should stop you. Simply following you is even worse than not stopping you. Kora left Percy and grabbed the satyr by the back of his shirt. While he was downcast, Percy just stood there, worried but unable to do anything. A few steps later, though, Kora began to laugh deeply, knocking Grover down in the process and confusing the satyr demigod duo. Did you really think I was around here by chance or something? Percy was confused when an arm was placed around his neck, and he looked to his side. He noticed it was Naruto himself, giving him a mocking smile at the joke, and behind the dark-haired man, Katara emerged with the same smile as the Hawaiian. Percy, but how? Colorado, did we find out you were going to run away without me? Naruto asked mockingly, earning Percy's nod. Well, I advise you not to talk to me more than 40 meters away. Katara, or better yet, keep your voices low, he said, embarrassing both boys. They were so focused that they didn't look up, or did they speak out loud? Or did they simply not see the reaction of the campers around them? So you followed us to go with us? Naruto nodded. Yeah, we had a little training, so we decided today was the best time to go after that lightning bolt. Like Grover said, we don't know what might get in our way. Percy, but why did you all come? I asked, looking at Kora and Katara, and received the same response from both relatives. Why not? Percy rolled his eyes at both girls' responses. You have it tough, he told Naruto, who looked at him confused, and noticing the look Percy shook his head. Now he remembered that Naruto doesn't know what a girlfriend is and maybe he doesn't know what feelings of love are. Kora, we better go now, next time someone finds them it won't be a joke. The team nodded and everyone ran back in the direction Percy had been running before. Do you have a travel plan at least? Naruto asked, following Percy closely. Well, we have a map, said the son of Poseidon, taking out a map Luke had given him. This will help us begin our journey. Naruto rolled his eyes. Unless you're planning on circumnavigating the world, I doubt a map alone would help us, Naruto said, looking at the map and noticing several conflicting points. Are we going to the underworld? Everyone nodded, and the boy smiled embarrassedly. Sorry. But how do we get started? Percy, the plan is to go to Washington for now, he said while jumping and ending up in a tree, although that caused a rope to grab onto his ankle. But being faster, the Hawaiian was able to take a step back, avoiding being caught. A few seconds later, Naruto, Kora, and Katara were ready to fight. Who's there? Naruto asked, not expecting a real answer, he just wanted a move. A movement that, when it happened, transmitted the vibrations of the ground to Naruto and Kora. They reacted by using the earth, causing a rumble to be heard in the distance. Did they catch him? Naruto touched the ground with his ankle and nodded after a few seconds. Whoever it is, they're good at avoiding movement. Their vibrations, even in there, are very low. Kora nodded, noticing the same thing. She doesn't even look like someone who's been caught and wants out. The group headed into the distance, where behind a tree stood a volcanic dome of earth. This was the shape Naruto used to capture whoever he was attacking. The height of the dome isn't even over 10 meters. If he were a demigod, he should be able to jump over this and escape easily. So, why doesn't he even move? Naruto peered over the top of the volcano prison, and upon seeing inside, his eyes rolled back in his head at what was inside. Some shoes? Kora was surprised. So whoever did this left their shoes as a distraction. It seems so. Naruto shrugged. I don't feel any major temperature changes in the atmosphere, so no one's been moving at super speed around here. That says it's close. Kora turned to look at her younger cousin. Can you see anything? I asked Katara, who seemed to have larger than normal pupils and was staring straight ahead. Naruto noticed this and raised an eyebrow in doubt. What are you doing? He uses the tiny drops of water in the air to magnify his demigod-like vision. This way, he can find someone hundreds of miles away. Naruto whistled at that. Can you do it? No, so far the only one who's demonstrated it is Katara. While children of the sea usually have enhanced vision underwater, Katara can do it even in the desert. She only needs a drop of water in the air. Naruto nodded. Katara, something moving in the distance between the trees. Naruto nodded and his bow, given to him by a goddess, appeared. Coordinates. Katara, 400 meters to the right at a 70-degree angle. Naruto did as instructed and aimed, but instead of 70 degrees, he set the bow at 69 degrees. And in an instant, a fire arrow shot into the distance, creating a ring of fire in its wake. And not even a thousandth of a nanosecond later, everyone heard the explosion generated by the fire arrow. You missed it, but it seems you destabilized it. Naruto, that was the plan, he said as he ran out with the others. Elsewhere, Annabeth could be seen slowly getting up from the ground after being hit in the back by an explosion moments ago. First someone falls into a trap, then I get caught in a volcano, and now this? The blonde shook her coat, which was placed around her waist. Whoever her enemy was, they were planning to capture her, not kill her. Possibly Hades soldiers looking for Percy and Naruto. And that wasn't a bad idea. A bloodhound had attacked the camp a while back, and Percy in particular, and now this could tell that Hades wanted to kill Percy. More so because it is said that he has his lightning bolt, even when Zeus himself accuses Percy and Naruto. Annabeth drew her dagger, as she felt a vibration pass by her, and was about to move away to attack. A moment later, she felt a breeze behind her again, making it hard for her to raise her hands and surrender. Are you planning to use me to get into the camp? I asked without any force, although a giggle confused her. Hello? The girl looked back, where Naruto was giving her a big smile. Wait. Was all of this you? Us. Kora said, arriving at the scene. What are you doing here at this time of night? Do you know it's less than 3 hours until daylight? Naruto, yeah, the plan was to get to Washington before dawn. Annabeth, before dawn? You were planning to run away. Kora, meh, 50/50ths. I already told Mr. D, although I don't think he checked my message. He never does anyway. Annabeth, still. Where they thought they were going with all of this, no? Kora, yes. Did you think you were going to look for Lord Zeus's Master Bolt? Naruto nodded. Percy and Grover were going to go alone, but we decided to go with them. Maybe something will happen to them. Katara pointed at the satyr and the demigod. They were very embarrassed to have Annabeth's gaze on them. It's Percy's fault. Percy, yes. I say, no. Grover. Naruto and Katara burst out laughing at the two boys' idiocies, while Annabeth still stared with deathly eyes at the satyr and son of Poseidon. Sigh. Let's go. Everyone was confused. Shall we? Kora repeated, confused. I'll go too. I can't trust you two not to get into a stupidly dangerous situation because you don't have a voice of reason in the group. Hey, that's offensive. Kora crossed her arms at her friend's words, while Naruto and Katara seemed to be deep in thought behind them. Their thoughts ranged from them having the choice of jumping into a pack of crocodiles that were blocking their path or crossing a road twice as long. The answer is more than obvious. I say if necessary, Naruto said, snapping out of his thoughts. It's always good to have someone like that around. For me, Moana and I, we always get along with Nani for that reason. Kora, Moana? That's right, where is she? Naruto, she fell asleep, said I'll only arrive in the next 5 days or something. Naruto shrugged. Moana isn't one for adventures and fights. I prefer to live a normal, boring life most of the time. Kora nodded in understanding. Many demigods either wanted to or were similar to them in that regard. Even she sometimes just wanted to be normal and not go out into the cities in fear that hundreds of monsters would attack her, and hurt the others around her for trying to harm her. Naruto, so are we leaving? Naruto pointed to the sky, remembering he had to get to Washington before dawn. Everyone did, because the bus was free at that time, and no one had the money to pay for it, so taking it for free was the best option. Me, damn poverty, even fanfics are affected. V. Chapter 19. The group could be seen boarding at a bus stop. I told you we had to bring money, Grover said to Percy, who shrugged. I didn't have any, and asking him for money, Mr. Chiron, would be suspicious. Percy took a seat in front of a group of 3, while Grover followed, his hooves covered by the fog. Annabeth, Percy's right, Mr. Chiron would notice. And you wouldn't be here if you gave him the slightest reason to be suspicious. Annabeth settled next to Kora, a little far from Grover and Percy. Naruto looked at the bus as he took a window seat. I don't know what this is, but it looks cool. He smiled, looking from outside. You've never been on a bus? Katara asked, looking at the Hawaiian, who shook his head. So that thing about being a nature boy is true. The girls seemed very encouraged by her words. Although Naruto didn't understand their moods. More or less, it's not very good to be on an island, he said, his hands crossed. He lived with Nanny as his personal nanny, and a few centuries later, he lived with his mortal brothers for a while, half a century to be precise. Her life was boring, until almost 3 years ago, when Moana ended up on her island during a storm, and also the day Moana lost her memory. She still wondered why she was at sea on a stormy day in the first place. Katara, well, considering you're you, I can tell you're better than 90% of the men at camp. Faster, stronger, better at whatever you wear. You seem like you're something of a perfect man. You're even prettier than most. Naruto looked at the girl with doubt because of the compliments. Normally, he wasn't surprised by compliments. They were normal in his life. Someone like him, it was normal to always have someone prolonging everything he did. It was also one of the reasons he stopped living with humans. They were short-lived, easily forgotten, and easily surprised. But even with his years of experience, the girl's words were flattering and made him feel truly flattered. Naruto, well, thanks, I guess. Naruto looked out the window, avoiding the face of the young woman next to him. Being flattered was so normal for him that when he actually felt truly flattered, he didn't know how to react. Naruto put aside his blush when he saw a grown woman standing next to an old woman and a baby in a stroller. It was the woman he saved from a minotaur when he arrived in Washington, and she seemed to be staring at them. Naruto turned his head to the side, staring just as intently at the woman. The woman quickly turned her face away, as if she had nothing to do with him. The old woman raised a finger and pointed at him. Naruto blinked in confusion, very confusion, and the woman and baby in the stroller seemed to stop moving. They left all their attention on the old woman, who continued pointing at him, scissors in hand, a snow-white thread on the edge, threatening to be cut. What are you staring at? Beside Naruto, Katara stood up to look at the boy and what he was looking at. And as she did, Katara was amazed. This is bad, very, very bad, she whispered, though Naruto didn't hear her. The white thread on the edge of the scissors confused Naruto. That thread called to him, but at the same time, it didn't. It was as if he was pulling on one part of himself, and another part seemed to be pushing on the first part, as if he too wanted the thread cut. As if the thread was holding him back, and when it was cut, the first part would be hurt by the thread, and the second. Naruto was quickly pulled along as he began to run alongside Kora, Annabeth, Grover, Percy, and Katara. What's wrong? Kora, who was holding Naruto, let go when she saw that he was coming too. It's the Moirai. Naruto looked confused. Moirai, also known as the Fate Sisters. They are Parathon, Pairon, and Melon. Past, present, and future, he said, speeding up. Naruto raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? Kora, in short, they're the people who decide when someone dies. They're always there when someone's about to die. They only show up when they're expecting someone to die. Naruto nodded. That was bizarre. Like everything, only supernatural beings see them, Annabeth added, while Percy seemed to frown behind her. Naruto, Does this mean? Katara. Let's hope nothing, she said, though she didn't believe that was a possibility herself. The one pointing was Melon. Could that mean something? Stories always talk about pauses like the one that occurred after someone's death, so why would this be any different? Katara, this way. The girl looked at her cousin, who had swerved, and turned with her. She stopped running like everyone else, scanning the area. The fog is concentrated here. Does that mean something? Katara asked, looking around the area. There was nothing supernatural about it, but there was a lot of fog, perhaps trying to hide something that would happen here. Or is it a very natural place for beasts? Nothing in particular. Kora dismissed her cousin and her question, deciding this place seemed to be some kind of hideout, or something if the fog was so obscuring. We'd better go. We'll have to walk. Naruto felt something strange, and looked to the side, a little confused by what he felt, or different, what he didn't feel. Again? Naruto ignored the strange feeling and decided to return to the conversation, where Kora and Annabeth seemed to be discussing the situation. Fufufu, and if he seems to sense us like he told us outside, that's surprising for a shadow like him. On top of a building, a girl with red hair and completely black eyes, with crimson flames around her and a crimson bird on her left shoulder next to her blood-red black dress and golden gloves made of fine fabric. What do you think? The crimson firebird on his left shoulder looked at its owner and shook its head. Yes, I say the same. It's something so basic, yet complex at the same time. It's like looking at a shadow on a wall, which should be two-dimensional on a four-dimensional page. The bird looked at him. Limit yourself to 4 dimensions too, and I want you to make the adventure a little difficult for him. Not now, but wait a moment and act. You decide when. The woman let go of the bird, which a few seconds after flying away seemed to change and narrow down. It took on a form, and with that form, it became physical, and its heat visibly distorted space as soon as it entered and narrowed down its dimensions. The woman disappeared into thin air, leaving everything as it was. Being in a form is strange. I'm content with nothing more than being beyond that, the woman thought, leaving her form and returning to what she was and always was. The last light. Naruto looked at the corner again. He felt something. He didn't know what, but he felt something. Not in the ordinary environment, just something inside him telling him there was something there. Is something wrong? Naruto stared into the distance. I feel like we're being followed, he said, ignoring the sensation and turning his gaze to a group of elderly people he recognized from the bus. Aren't these those grandmothers from earlier? Naruto asked, looking, although he quickly stomped, causing a stone wall to block the enemy's attack that left a visible crater on his side of the wall, which confused Naruto a little. My wall shouldn't be that fragile, he whispered to himself, though in an instant Naruto ran around the wall to attack, but in an instant a flap of his wings caused it to vanish into dust. And then another Naruto emerged from the ground, though he later turned into mud and settled on top of the women, where the one in front of him had barely taken her liberated form as the Furies they were. They escaped, one of the women said, noticing that all this had been a distraction since the others had already left. This dried mud isn't normal, thought Fury. The dried mud would crack even in the wind. This one looked more like cement. Elsewhere. Naruto, and why are we running? Naruto asked, raising an eyebrow. He felt weaker but not enough to lose to those old women who weren't really old. I mean, they were grandmothers. Percy, I don't know the others, but I know Mrs. Dodds isn't something we'll be doing right now. She's a Fury, so she'll just be running away and coming back. It's better for us to lose her than for her to lose us. Annabeth, Percy's right, Furies aren't exactly the kind of thing you want to fight head-on. They tend to be annoying if you let them take control of your encounters. Naruto shrugged. Is that true? Naruto whispered to Katara, who stared blankly as she shook her head. I'm not a library girl, ask Kora, she said, and Naruto, still running, turned to the other side where Kora was. I have no idea, she said, arms crossed, although she blushed with embarrassment. Naruto rolled his eyes. You're my guide, shouldn't you be helping me with this? He asked, staring blankly at Kora, who turned her head, still arms crossed. Annabeth, Stop playing games, we have to get out of the city. The further away, the safer, she said as she jumped on what appeared to be a smaller motorcycle. The good thing here was that the bus dropped them off very close to the outskirts. Maybe they could continue on their way after this. Naruto looked into the distance, a little confused. Is that a store? Percy, apparently, he's making a shop in the middle of the woods? The boy was confused. He was sure that a few seconds ago they were entering a forest. Now, they seemed to be in the middle of a desert. This isn't normal, is it? Naruto asked, as his rune glowed brightly and his bow appeared in its mythical brilliance. Percy pulled out a pen, and a sword appeared in a second as Kora readied her fists filled with whirling wind and Annabeth seemed to pull out a dagger and Katara was barely on guard. Naruto, there's someone in there. Naruto looked at the cabin where an obvious shadow was moving in front of the window. Approaching the cabin, the group noticed something. Stone statues? Is that what this shop is about? Annabeth, don't get too confident, Percy, she said, looking sideways at the boy who nodded, while Naruto was focusing his attention on the vibrations, and noticed that a small vibration was noticeable in a larger, and abysmal one. It was like comparing the vibration of a baby to that of an adult bear. 2 targets in, do you see anything, Katara? The girl, who had been staring at the cabin, fell silent as her dilated pupils shrank. Well, the humidity isn't high enough to be able to look inside the cabin. The particles are too far apart for that. The girl rubbed her eyes a little during her explanation, and Kora was at her side for any sudden pain. Well, maybe the cabin has nothing to do with us showing up here. It's best to put away the weapons and go in peace. Naruto made his weapon disappear again as he carelessly approached the cabin. Are you sure? We'll let him do that. Grover looked a little scared as Naruto approached the cabin. If you want to see the level of something above humans and below gods, Naruto is the one to show it to you. It'll be fine. Kora made it clear as the wind in her hands disappeared and she approached Naruto. Kora, you too? Grover looked at the deputy chief with the same fearful expression. Naruto seems very disinterested at first glance, but when you notice him, he's always subconsciously active. The girl looked at Naruto. It was as if the boy's sixth sense was watching her, touching her, smelling her, and tasting her the entire time he was around. Annabeth and Percy followed the group, leaving the satyr, who, still hesitant, followed the group. It was difficult, but he knew it was safer with them than without them. Whether or not they consciously threw themselves into the pit of Hades, at least it was metaphorical. No? Chapter 20. Naruto opened the door, just as a bell rang. Hello? With a smile on his face, Naruto smiled as he moved into the store filled with super realistic rock statues. Naruto, what the hell are you doing? Naruto turned around, ignoring the satyr's voice calling him to the group. Looking at the source of the footsteps. Oh, there's someone. Kora turned to the others, and an old woman was walking toward them, a cane in her hand and dark glasses on. Annabeth slapped her face, seeing that they'd practically invaded a blind woman's house. Oh, who's over there? Naruto smiled. We're just some kids passing by. We just wanted to know exactly where we are, or so I think. Naruto turned around to confirm if that was his intention. Several shrugged, following Naruto, who barged in here without permission. Ask if he has a map, it's better, said the daughter of wisdom. Naruto, we might also need a mala, you know. Those pieces of paper that record the world in 2D dimensions. He explained, making a makeshift square with his hands. Oh yes. I think I could help you with that. The woman smiled. Follow me, Mineta said as she walked. Naruto and everyone followed her to the back of the large tent, which led them to a sort of greenhouse where it seemed to be completely daylight, unlike outside. Many more statues were around, the only difference being that these were in positions of wanting to run or of terror. Katara, now this is realistic, she whispered, looking at one with a face of pure terror, while she was on the ground with her hand raised in supplication. Annabeth, too much, he whispered because this didn't sit right with him. The statues ahead weren't normal either. Their positions were too ordinary to have been made for a purpose, and these were too realistic in the terror on their faces, though they could simply be portraits of travelers, or commissioned. The girl tried to dismiss the possibility she had. This woman didn't smell strange, so she couldn't accuse or attack her. Besides, she was blind, which eliminated several possibilities. No? Turning around, the woman disappeared around the corner from everyone's sight. Stop. Naruto raised a hand, and everyone was confused. What's going on? Kora asked, just as confused as everyone else. The intention is to harm us. Something wants to harm us there. No, something wants to harm everything that enters there, not just us. Naruto looked at his companions. That's what. Kora was cut off when she stopped because the lady had returned. Hey, is something wrong? I must have heard your footsteps a while ago. Naruto, still smiling, shook his head. Don't worry. I think we have an idea of where we are. I happened to hear about this place a while back, and that's enough to give us some reference. The Uzumaki raised his hand in farewell. Good. We'll leave. We don't need the map anymore. The woman, who looked confused, then smiled. Oh, is that it? Naruto stopped. Yes, he said, already more alert than usual. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. The woman took off her glasses, revealing her eyes and the emptiness inside them caused by the lack of eyeballs. I'm sorry to hear that, but we've been having some trouble here lately. My little boy hasn't had anything to eat. Naruto, I'm sorry, Ori, but we don't have anything to give him either. If he waits for us, we'll come back with things for him. What food does he like? The woman smiled, as her dry hair seemed to come back to life, taking on a brown hue, and her short, age-related form lengthened, and little by little her form seemed to rejuvenate to a point not much larger than Naruto's. Semi-gods, they are his favorites. The woman smiled, her eye sockets gaping in a chilling way. Well, that means she was the one who wanted to hurt us all along. Kora shifted into fighting form, wind swirling around her fists. Katara began collecting water from nearby ponds, while Percy drew his sword from his pen and Annabeth drew her celestial bronze weapon. That's illogical, Naruto thought, as fire appeared in his arms naturally, unlike before. She's never shown hostility, and hostility isn't something that just comes and goes. Besides, she doesn't currently feel hostile, which is what's happening here. Naruto hit the ground, and fire exploded in all directions, raising the resulting value of the burned rock. Not a second later, he was launched at the woman, who quickly dodged him without much trouble. She's fast. Naruto, who crashed into the wall due to his inability to control his speed, looked at the woman handing him the sword as if nothing had happened. My power is very unbalanced. I don't know when I'm using a moderate amount, or when I'm using a small amount. The boy hit the wall, and a pillar sent him hurtling toward the woman. She simply watched him travel in her direction. Naruto placed his hand on her outstretched foot to kick it, and as a leverage, he threw a strong punch at the woman who avoided it. Although she still received a cut on her cheek from the wind that enveloped Naruto's arm. Fire, wind, and earth. What kind of godly father do you have? Naruto raised an eyebrow. Wind? That was speed created. Naruto brushed that aside and launched himself at the woman. She easily avoided him, her hair wrapping around Naruto's arm. He frowned at the pain as he was sent flying a moment later by a powerful kick. Oh damn! Naruto held his arm, which was completely purple. What was that? Poison. I'm immune to all kinds, even divine poison. Naruto looked at his arm and raised a hand, thinking of cutting it off. But not a moment later, he crashed into the wall, creating a large crack and going through it. Yeah. The boy was in shock. Did I hit him? Footsteps rang out, while Naruto watched in a blur as the woman walked toward him. Oh? You like it? Call it domination. When one of my babies bites someone, he takes over the limb closest to the bite. Although, from the neck up, I control everything about you. Naruto frowned. It won't matter if we cut it, it's not physical, she said, snapping her fingers, and Naruto had to turn his head to avoid the impact of her fist. However, the woman snapped her fingers again, this time hitting his torso. A second later, he frowned in pain. My nerves are on edge every time he orders me to do something. Naruto ignored his arm and flashed the seal where a weapon appeared on his still normal right arm. Well, time to experiment. The Hawaiian raised his weapon to the woman. A simple weapon, it was simply a type of curved, silver-colored blade, made of some special metal that naturally glowed around it and emanated from itself. Naruto, okay, there you go. Let's go. The boy slashed downwards, and blood flew all around. Then it trickled slowly and steadily, in a soothing pattern, if it wasn't blood. Are you crazy? The snake-haired woman watched as Naruto cut the veins on her wrist. You really read between the lines, don't you? Naruto smiled as he repeated the action on his shoulder. While the damage didn't heal, the arm drooped limply, rendering it completely useless and unable to move with any disturbance. You said cutting it off and healing it wouldn't work, because the reason isn't physical. Naruto vanished his weapon. It was all true, even the physical stuff, right? Yes, it is physical, though cutting off the arm and then regenerating it wouldn't really work. You're very intelligent, or you have a great perception of people. You notice my shape shifting, the slightest, noticing when I was lying and when I wasn't. That's a gift, but tell me, what did you discover? Naruto smiled. The bites of those things inject something into me, that's obvious. But since my healing doesn't repel them and my immunity to venom doesn't protect me from the effect, presumably it's something more like a symbiote tricking my body into thinking it's part of me and letting it float through my bloodstream at will. And then reaching a checkpoint. Checkpoint? Naruto, the major points of a limb's joints. I called them that, do you like it? The boy smiled, and the woman shook her head because he was too relaxed for the situation he was in. At first, I think it lodged in a part of my brain and controlled the limb it came from. But you said it controlled joint by joint, and if it hit my neck, it would be the end of me. That made me think about something. Naruto flashed his seal again, causing a weapon to appear. It was a pair of gloves with crimson Japanese writing on his hands. The gloves weren't white, allowing the shine of the gloves to stand out. Whatever enters my body either remains in control of the nearest joint, so either its movement is limited, or it sticks to the joint without you being able to do anything against it. The woman smiled. That's more than the gods have learned about me in the last few millennia. You're very clever. Naruto smiled. When it comes to battle, they usually say I am. The boy grinned, and got into fighting shape. They also tell me I'm very careless and strong. Naruto shot towards the woman and began attacking with his good arm. Although the woman seemed to be fine, even with her eyes closed, the woman just kept dodging and attacking every so often with her hair that turned into snakes. You surprise me. Naruto was confused as he launched a handstand kick accompanied by a fire arc that the woman had no trouble dodging. Why do you say that? Well, considering your friends disappeared a while ago and you don't seem worried, it means you have a lot of trust in them, right? Naruto raised an eyebrow, then looked at where he'd left his companions, where nothing but a hole in the ground remained. Oh, I lost them. I lost them. I lost them. Mr. D is going to kill me when we get back to camp. It's all my fault. How will I look at the others after losing my companions? Naruto spun around like crazy, screaming like crazy, under the woman's closed eyes and wide-eyed expressions. He's the strangest boy I've ever seen. What do you think? A snake poked its tongue out of the woman's head, and the woman nodded. Yes, the demigods are getting too confident that they're so unconcerned about danger. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Is that what the snake said? He thought blankly, sitting on the edge of a rock. Well, I can't say anything. My mom protected me 99.99999999999999999. The woman stared at Naruto while saying nines like crazy 99999999999. You're not going to stop, are you? A snake in the woman's hair made her tongue wrinkle again in denial. Sigh. I'll take his eyes out, maybe that'll be enough to shut him up. I thought, as Naruto continued to repeat his nines. 99,999,999% of my life. I'm not the most free person, so I don't usually fear danger," he said as the boy stood up. "Well, time to start again." The Hawaiian man stood up and launched himself at the woman, who dodged him again. Though he was careless, Naruto was bitten on his right wrist. Reacting, the boy cut the veins in his wrist and attacked again with a kick. He had hit his target, or so the boy thought, when suddenly a kick sent him flying. "Oh yeah? That did hurt, unlike the other hits." Naruto frowned, his stomach hurting. There's something different about you, don't you think?" Naruto looked at the woman as she stood up holding her stomach. Do you notice me?" Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Aside from the fact that all your hair is now permanently snake-like, there isn't much to notice, but let's just say it's a noticeable difference when it comes to your attacking style." The woman smiled. "This is my divine form, which is why all my snakes are present at all times right now. Because they, unlike me, cannot take mortal or semi-mortal forms." "Naruto, I didn't understand. Does that mean that your snakes when they appear are something like something immortal and something mortal?" "No, they're not connected, since immortal and mortal can't interact. And no one who isn't immortal has the perception to sense them. Not even me, in my mortal form." Naruto didn't understand anything, and his utter confusion showed it on his face. "The form of a god is something completely transcendental to the world you mortals live in. It's something beyond, completely removed from your idea of what the world is. But this form, being the true one, is more vulnerable and will give us a definitive death if we use it." Naruto nodded, though he didn't really understand anything. "Does that mean that unlike normal monsters, you won't come back if I kill you right now?" "Okay, that's enough." Naruto stood up and prepared himself. "You don't have arms, so you've already lost." The woman turned around, pulling out some strands of hair that were snakes. They enlarged and settled on her sword in front of Naruto. "It's a surprise that a mortal is at the level of existence of an immortal, but that doesn't change the fact that you're still a mere demigod." The woman turned around, suddenly forced to back away from a powerful blow to the ground, cracking open the floor. "Oh, sorry. Where I come from, turning your back on me in battle means I'll kill you." "Your arms like?" "Naruto, I have such a vast arsenal of weapons, I can't even name them, and I've already forgotten most of them. But some are useful for different situations." Naruto placed a giant warhammer made of a strange mineral resembling an emerald on his shoulder as he prepared himself. "Strangely, I'm excited about it. Ever since I woke up from my coma, eager to fight, don't let me down."
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.